It will turn much clearer as we head into this afternoon across northwestern areas, but still some spells of quite wet weather, drizzly rain, particularly over the high ground and coast. We could see some fog and mist around as well throughout this afternoon across western areas of Wales, down into southwest England as well. Brighter across central and eastern areas, highs of around 20 degrees, so not feeling too bad, but actually across the northwest, when that rain does clear through, the winds are really going to pick up as we head into this evening and into Thursday as well. And we'll also start to see some pretty heavy showers moving in. There is a risk of thunderstorms with these showers moving into northwestern areas of Scotland, as well as some northern areas of Northern Ireland. Now, the band of rain will likely sit slightly across northeastern areas of England, central areas of England as well into this evening, and there'll be quite a lot of cloud round across the south and east, but across Wales and southwest England starting to brighten up a little bit here. But that breezier weather will become more widely felt as we head towards Thursday. So a clearer night to come, some clear spells, mainly dry for many southern and central areas, but these showers will continue to push in, particularly across northwestern Scotland and some southwestern areas of Scotland as well. So a slightly fresher start tomorrow with those clearer skies tonight. But tomorrow will be a much brighter day, more in the way of sunshine for southern and central areas, and it should stay dry through much of the day, but frequent showers will still move in for western areas of northwestern England, Scotland and some parts of Northern Ireland as well. And we could see gale force winds as well as we head into the afternoon. So a fresh feeling afternoon in the north, a little bit warmer in the south with highs of around 21 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 3rd of July. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
With just hours to go before Brits cast their vote, who'll get the keys to number 10? We'll reveal some shocking new polling results.
And Boris is back, urging voters to stick with the Tories and reject the Putinistas and the Corbynistas. But has his message been undermined somewhat by Suella Braverman? The former Home Secretary says this election could spell the end for the Conservative Party.
And the Jay Slater mystery deepens as a new photograph emerges. We speak to the journalist behind the scoop. It's been a long, short campaign. Ever since Rishi Sunak stood on the steps of Downing Street, drenched in rain, saying that he'd met with the King and called it a general election for the 4th of July, things have felt fairly static. But today, this is the last day of the campaign. Polls open tomorrow morning, and by 10 p.m. tomorrow evening, we'll likely have a new government.
But what hasn't been static is the race for second place. If we believe the polls, Labour are looking like they'll have a majority. The size of that majority, we don't yet know. Polls say different. But for second place, it has been quite exciting, I would say. No one thought perhaps that Nigel Farage would throw his hat in the ring. That spiced things up, that's for sure. The Liberal Democrats have had a little bit of a surge. The Conservatives seem to have crept up slightly, but it doesn't look like it's going to be enough. But is it a done deal? Is it a done deal? Is a Labour majority an absolute done deal? The Conservatives keep telling us that, don't they? Heading for a super majority. They say don't let that happen.
Well, we'll be looking at our latest poll and what the predictions seem to be for this contest in just a few moments' time. But we want your thoughts as well. Do you believe the polls? Do you believe the politicians? Have your say at gbnews.com/your say. That's after your headlines with Sophia.
Tom, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 12. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Political parties are making their final pitches to voters ahead of tomorrow's election, with Labour saying that if people want change, they must vote for it. Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country, giving his party the mandate they need to repair what he called broken Britain.
We are fighting for every vote, and across the country there will be constituencies which will go down to the wire. And therefore we will continue to fight until 10 o'clock tomorrow night, making the case that change only happens if you vote for it. But it is a huge opportunity for our country. This is the opportunity to turn the page and to move forward. And I want people to go out and vote for change and be part of the change that I think will bring about such a different and better future for our country.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson returned to the campaign trail last night with a warning that a Labour victory means electing Britain's most left-wing government since the war. In his first and final appearance of the election campaign, the former Prime Minister said giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would mean higher taxes. The Prime Minister appeared on stage shortly afterwards, telling the crowd that it was great to have a united Conservative family, though Mr Johnson didn't mention any of his successor's achievements.
If these polls are right, then at the very moment when this country has beaten COVID and beaten post-COVID inflation, at the very moment when we should be encouraging enterprise and growth and putting some money into home ownership and putting some money into people's pockets, Westminster is about to go in diametrically the opposite direction. And so none of us can sit back as a Labour government prepares to use a sledgehammer majority to destroy so much of what we have achieved, what you have achieved.
The enthusiasm seen amongst the crowd at last night's rally will give hope to some Conservatives of a surprise last-minute boost. Boris Johnson led the Conservatives to a substantial win 4.5 years ago, but his 11th-hour entrance may not be enough to claw back any of Labour's significant poll lead. Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride says only voters can decide the final outcome.
You look at the polls, it's pretty clear that Labour at this stage are heading for an extraordinary landslide on a scale that has probably never, ever been seen in this country before. And that is why I think it's so important that Boris's message, my message, the Prime Minister's message is, you know, this is not a by-election tomorrow. This is going to set what happens for the next 5, maybe 10 years. Let's have a parliament that can hold the government to account.
Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are telling voters the election is a chance to build a caring nation. The party says they've struck a balance between fun and serious in their campaigning and insists its message on health, social care and cleaning up Britain's water is resonating with voters. Reflecting on Boris Johnson's appearance at the Conservative rally last night, Sir Ed Davey says it's time to move on.
It's bizarre that the Conservatives are reminding people of the failures. I think people want to move on from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak and all the damage they've done to our country. And they want to know what you're going to do in the future, how you're going to change our country, particularly how you're going to sort out NHS and care. And that's what Liberal Democrats are talking about. We want to make sure we build a caring nation where the importance of social care and family carers is really at the front, so we can both give them the support they need, but also transform our NHS at the same time by investing in care.
To other news, the former leader of the DUP will face a trial over allegations of historical sex abuse. A judge at Newry Magistrates Court said this morning that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson and his wife, Lady Eleanor Donaldson, both have a case to answer in connection with the allegations. Sir Geoffrey is accused of 1 charge of rape, 4 of gross indecency and 13 charges of indecent assault between 1985 and 2008. And President Biden's poll rating has slipped in the wake of last week's debate, according to a leaked memo. The US news website Park reports that a confidential poll shows the president's support has started to fall in key states. It also found that Vice President Kamala Harris would perform better in a hypothetical match against Donald Trump. Senior party figures, including Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi, are standing by President Biden, despite growing calls for him to stand aside and allow someone else to become the Democratic nominee. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Sophia Wensler. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
With just 18 hours until the public head to the ballot box, a new GB News People's poll predicts that Sir Keir Starmer will secure the keys to number 10.
Yes, well, let's take a look at what voters are thinking. So here you go. Labour ahead with 36% of the vote. Reform UK in second place with 20%. The Conservatives down on 16%. The Liberal Democrats 10%. The Greens 9% and the SNP have 4%.
Well, despite Labour's lead, only a minority of voters think Britain will be safe in safe hands with a Labour government, just 32%.
Interesting. And a plurality of 2019 Tory voters want a more small c Conservative Party, whereas 13% want a more Liberal Party and 17% like it as it is.
Plus, there is little tribal loyalty left in British politics, as half the country say they're only lending their party of choice their vote. Around 60% of Labour voters say they'll be lending their vote to another party.
That's very interesting, but only 1 in 4 voters think the outcome of the election will make a big difference to their lives.
Goodness me, lots to digest there. Let's speak to the man behind the poll. The pollster and academic, Professor Matt Goodwin, joins us now. First of all, it seems very, very odd that there is this lack of enthusiasm, this sort of lack of fulsome support behind any of these parties. And it looks like Sir Keir Starmer is going to waltz into number 10 on a lower share of the vote than Boris Johnson.
I think that's right, Tom. This is still very much the none-of-the-above election. We know it's taking place amid record levels of distrust and a lack of confidence in the political class. That was some crucial research going into this election campaign. And since the campaign started, we've really seen a lot of voters rejecting not just the Conservatives, but also Labour. I mean, here's one thing to consider. The combined vote share currently for the two main parties looks set to be the lowest combined vote share really since the two-party system that we have today began. There's going to be high levels of support for reform, the Lib Dems, Greens, the SNP. And I think under the surface of these results on Thursday night, Friday morning, I do think this public disillusionment is going to be very visible and unavoidable for many people.
Now, Professor, I think it's worth pointing out that you have reform on quite a high proportion of the vote there. Now, other pollsters aren't putting them that high, and they're putting Conservatives above 20% in some we've seen in the last couple of days. What are you doing differently?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things going on here. The first is, like everybody else, we have the Labour Party down. We've got a bit more evidence that Labour's been squeezed in the final days of the campaign. They're down to the mid-30s. The difference here is we have Reform second, the Conservatives third. Now, we have Reform on 20%. Lord Ashcroft last night had them on 18%. Survation have just released a poll as I was coming on air, which have Reform on 17%. Other pollsters have them down at 11, 12%. So there is a lot of variation as to where people are putting this Reform vote share. We're not doing anything differently. We're using the same methodology we've used during the entire election campaign, before the campaign. We're using a data provider that's used by 3 or 4 different pollsters. So we haven't changed our underlying method at all. We're simply saying that we expect the Reform Party vote, not necessarily seats, remember, but the vote share to be a little bit higher than what some other pollsters are putting it.
And this is the interesting point, is it not? When we're looking at national vote share, of course, we're looking at the SNP there in your poll on 4%. If another party was on 4%, they would barely get any seats. The SNP are going to get double digits, likely, of seats because it's a very concentrated vote share. I wonder if Reform, given their big air war message, their sort of rallying style of politics, trying to get the message out to as many people across the country as possible, is perhaps less targeted, and therefore there are going to be quite a few wasted Reform votes in seats that they would never hope to win.
I think that's a great point, Tom. There is some analysis already by some of my academic colleagues showing that this is going to be the most disproportional election since 1983, since the SDP almost replaced Labour in the national polls. Some viewers will remember that time in British politics. And what that means is that we're going to see lots of votes not corresponding to the same number of seats. So you might see, for example, Nigel Farage and Reform, a bit like he did in 2015, polling 4 million votes, but only coming out with 1 or 2 seats. In the same way you might see, for example, the Conservatives polling, a low share of the vote compared to what they're used to, but still, a fairly large number of seats. And I think one of the key messages that's going to come out of this election, I suspect, will be, again, this case for reform, that we're going to not reform the party, but reform the system. We're going to have lots of people feeling as though they've been voting for parties that have won very few seats, and we're going to have a lot of apathy out there in the country. The other thing, by the way, briefly to keep your eyes on, is turnout. Turnout may well fall into the low 60s, if not the high 50s. So we might see something like what we saw in 2001, 2005, lots of people just refusing to engage with the election at all. That's another key thing to watch out for. But this is going to be, fascinating. There's so many known unknowns going into this. How many seats are Reform going to win? How low are the Tories going to go? How high is Labour going to go? Will Labour re-emerge in Scotland? I suspect they will. Also, the Lib Dems, are they going to have a better night than some are predicting? And where are those undecided voters going to go, Emily and Tom? I mean, we've got 6 to 10% undecided voters even today. What are they going to do when they go into the polling station? So treat all polls with a pinch of salt, all right? That's the first thing really to say. And just lastly, I'll leave viewers with this. We're either going to see the biggest Labour majority that we've really seen ever in British history, or we're going to see the biggest error that we've ever had in polling, in the polling industry's history, in which case pollsters should really shut up shop and walk away with their tail between their legs. So we're going to see one of those two things.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Matt, we're not going to let you go quite yet. Very interesting, some of the questions you're asking. Only a minority of voters think Britain will be in safe hands with a Labour government. 43% think it will not be in safe hands. The level of scepticism, and also what we see is is how people aren't really voting for something. They're voting against the alternative. Perhaps that's different when it comes to reform, because there's a bit of momentum behind that, people voting for that to be the opposition, that party. But yes, people, you know, are just scared of the other option. It's a bit depressing, isn't it?
Well, I think, take reform as an example. We now know, we've had some new data from YouGov yesterday on this. I've also surveyed reform voters. We know that they're voting for the party because they like what the party's offering, right? They want lower levels of legal migration. They want lower levels of illegal migration. They want to leave the ECHR. They want stronger borders. So we know that's an instrumental vote. People are voting for reform because they like it. But we also know that when it comes to the Labour Party in particular, there's actually very little mass public enthusiasm for the Labour opposition. It's not that Keir Starmer's winning this election. It's that the Tories are really losing it. And you can see that in lots of areas. For example, if you ask people, who do you trust the top issues to manage, the top issues facing Britain? Do you trust Labour or the Conservatives to manage the economy, the NHS, immigration? On lots of these questions, yes, Labour are ahead slightly, but on lots of these questions, if you add up the number of people who say none of them or I don't know who to back, that's often the winner. Keir Starmer's leadership ratings, they're okay, but they're pretty flat. His net leadership rating is about +8. Tony Blair in 1997 was +50. Okay, so we don't have a leader who's cutting through, which is why, you know, my prediction, if I'm allowed to make one, is that I do think this Labour government, if indeed we end up with one, is going to be very unpopular very quickly because it doesn't seem to have strong foundations. There isn't a positive endorsement of Labour. So you've got a lot of disillusionment out there in the country. We know the economy is not going to improve anytime soon. We know Labour have had to buy into public spending cuts that have been left in the government finances. And we know probably taxes are going to have to go up, if we're being honest with voters, or we're not going to be able to afford the amount that we're spending on our national debt and public services. So if you put all of that together, I do think this Labour government is going to have a very difficult time in office. And it may be that, you know, this honeymoon period, if there is one for Keir Starmer, may be one of the shortest honeymoon periods we've actually had in contemporary British politics, where the debate moves on from, hey, look at this massive majority, to, hey, look at all of these problems in a matter of hours.
Yes, I've been talking to a number of commentators who will say that sort of, look at this pothole in the road. This is currently Rishi Sunak's pothole, but on Friday, that becomes Keir Starmer's pothole, and everyone becomes very, very angry with Keir Starmer because what on earth is he going to do about it? Matt Goodwin, thank you so much for joining us and talking us through that poll. Really interesting stuff there. And I have to say that when people say the Labour Party can't possibly get almost every seat in the House of Commons, I mean, that's a ridiculous thing to think about. You only have to look back to 2015 and Scotland. The SNP won all but 3 seats in Scotland. All but 3 seats on less than half the vote, because the pro-UK vote was split between 3 parties and the SNP took up all the independents' votes. I mean, a similar thing could happen with a split in the centre-right here in the UK.
Possibly. Joining us in the studio is former Armed Forces Minister James Heappey. James, thank you very much indeed. Does that poll surprise you at all?
The implications of it surprised me. I just used quite a sort of popular modeler, electoral calculus to punch in the numbers from your poll, and that would have Labour on 454 seats, the Tories on 46, the Lib Dems on 74, and Reform on 34. I mean, that's Tom, to your point.
Thank you for doing that for us.
Well, I mean, but just to your point, Tom, about what happened in Scotland, our political system does allow for those incredible shifts. The other number that jumped out to me in your discussion with Matt just then was that only 52%, that number again, of the electorate are intending, according to your poll, to vote for a party that realistically could provide a prime minister come Friday morning. That's that level of disillusionment, that level of screw you all, none of the above, I protest. That, again, I think gives enormous credence to what Matt just said about how quickly even a government that has over 2/3 of the MPs in the House of Commons on their side could become really unpopular really quickly. I'm not sure that the pothole becomes his on Friday. I think there's a period of time when they just get to blame everything on us, and we will almost become even less popular in the aftermath as Labour kind of air all of the things that are not right in government.
It's even worse than it was said, and, we're going to have to raise this tax because the inheritance was so bad.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a couple of years where you get to do that. But there comes a point in the middle of this Parliament when the anger of the UK public that they want incredible public services whilst paying low taxes becomes Keir's to own. And the idea that a 258 majority could be overturned in a single election, well, the idea that a 90 majority that Boris won could be overturned in a single election. So the British public are very volatile. Maybe your poll isn't entirely accurate. Please God, may that be the case, because those numbers are utterly terrifying. But it's pretty sobering. It tells us that Friday morning is, I don't think it's going to be a particularly fun time to be a Conservative.
Goodness me. This is, of course, all in the context of perhaps some of the most volatile years of politics that we've experienced as a country since the Second World War. Very unpredictable events happening. I'm old enough to remember when people said Boris Johnson would be in power for 10 years, and now he's the warm-up act for Rishi Sunak. Do you think Boris entering the fray at that last-minute rally held by the Conservatives, this Stop the Supermajority rally they held last night, what do you think were the calculations behind that?
That Boris cuts through where no other does. People like Mel Stride are brilliant secretaries of state and actually are really good at going out morning after morning.
We've heard a lot of
and
him.
doing the difficult job of speaking up for the government. But you could put Mel out 100 times, and Mark Harper and Grant Shapps and very, very good political spokespeople. But in 100 appearances on the morning media round, they will get less traction than Boris gets in 10 minutes of speaking at a rally last night. The great line, don't let the Putinistas bring in the Corbynistas. That's just a brilliant Boris line.
Yeah.
Is entirely true. And in my part of the world, we're in an incredible situation where more people will vote for a right-of-centre party tomorrow. I'm certain of that in the constituency that I used to represent. But they'll end up with a Lib Dem MP that is a member of CND, anti-Trident, went on Russia Today, praises Putin, peddles Putin's lines, and signed a pledge in 2019 with that Femi guy to overturn the referendum. And I just wonder the degree to which that's what people want.
You and every Conservative MP campaigned against an electoral system that would stop that. Not a proportional system, but the system of alternative vote where you get to preference your candidates. So if you're on the centre-right and you want to vote for, say, Reform first and Conservative second, those votes would amalgamate and you'd stop a situation like that.
And that is... and in fairness to the left, they will have said that in dozens of constituencies, maybe hundreds of constituencies in the last election, the reverse was true. So I'm not offering any criticism of first past the post. I'm just saying that the point that Boris made last night, that you vote for one thing to get another, there's a whole bunch of very angry people voting Reform. Insulting them is not the way. They've made their mind up. Every one of them I've spoken to on the doorstep tells me that they're not in the market for hearing any arguments from me. They've made their mind up. It's time to remind the Conservative Party what it should be standing for. But in Labour-leaning seats, those votes for Reform unlock a big tax Labour government that is exactly the opposite of what those voters want. In Lib Dem-facing seats, a vote for Reform delivers a vote for a party that wants to undo the referendum.
It's the race for second place. It's the race for the opposition. I want to know what you make of Suella Braverman's comments in the Telegraph today, whether you agree with her that essentially it's over, we need to prepare for the reality of opposition, and there needs to be an honest post-match analysis that may decide whether our party continues to exist at all. Is this existential in your view?
Well, those numbers are. If that's what it ends up as.
But the feeling you're getting?
No, and the feeling I'm getting is not existential. I think people forget the sort of size of the Conservative Party as an institution, the number of councillors that still exist out there, the number of members that there are. The party, I'm certain, will continue. What it means for the Conservative Party and the span of the right that it seeks to appeal to, whether or not that is now an irreconcilable electoral coalition, discuss. Boris had a great line last night. Farage had a great line, I think, the day before, where he said, he keeps hearing Conservatives saying that they're a broad church, but it seems to him that it's a church without a religion. I thought that was a great line, right? I mean, sometimes you can be so elastic to create the electoral coalition that you can kind of forget what you stand for. My criticism of Suella is it feels 48 hours too early, right? There is tons of time for recrimination, post-mortem, whatever else. Nobody's yet, or that's not true, postal votes have been going in for a week or two, but tomorrow is polling day. There's an awful lot of constituencies that are pretty close. I don't think for a second there's a Conservative government on Friday morning, but whether or not it is an existential level of results, or whether or not it's actually just a real kick in the nuts, but 150 seats is very much in the balance.
Do you think Suella Braverman's article had the potential to lose some Conservative seats that might otherwise have been kept?
Oh, maybe. But I mean, what she was doing is seeking first mover advantage in the leadership race, right? She just
wants to get in there first.
Exactly.
Wants to get in there first. Thank you very much indeed, former Armed Forces Minister James Heatley with us in the studio.
Well, from politics to prisons, because across England and Wales, prisons will reach operational breaking point within days of the election, with a potential Labour government needing to make tough decisions immediately. That's according to the head of the Prison Governors Union.
Now, this comes after Sir Keir Starmer admitted yesterday that as Prime Minister, he would, in all likelihood, continue the early release of prisoners due to overcrowding in jails.
Well, let's speak now to the former Labour Party spokesman, James Matthewson, because, James, there could be, and this is in a number of the papers this morning, literally a one-in, one-out policy across British prisons.
Yeah, what a sorry state of affairs, isn't it? And it's quite interesting, really, that the Labour Party will have to inherit this and they'll have to do something about it, because there's been a big debate in recent years inside the Labour Party about what their position is on prisons. And, I don't want to open that can of worms really the day before a general election, but it is a huge question. And Keir Starmer's used quite strong language. He's used quite, what I would say is traditional language to talk about the prison system. But people like myself who want to see widespread prison reform because it is much needed. And then we shouldn't have to see situations like overcrowding and overspending in prisons, because you've got people in prisons simply, in my opinion, who shouldn't be in prisons. This idea that it's a punitive system now where you go in and you're punished for being a bad person and then you come out and you do your time and you're reformed. It just simply doesn't work in the 21st century. It's not fit for purpose. But the Labour Party, of course, needs to hold that coalition of voters together before tomorrow. And this isn't really great timing for them.
Well, so what would a Labour government do then? Are they going to be tougher on crime? Are they going to build more prisons? Are they going to change up the whole system? Are they going to go softer in terms of more emphasis on rehabilitation than punishment? I mean, what's the big grand idea here from what you've heard?
Yeah, from what I see and what I hear within the party, within Lotto, within the front bench, is that it's as strong on crime and the causes of crime, which is a classic kind of Labour line that they like to wheel out, which is always talking about, yes, we obviously want to tackle crime and we think the individual actions of crime are wrong and we want to crack down on that, but we also want to crack down on the causes and those societal impacts. Now, I do think there is quite a bit in the manifesto.
And what are the causes, James? James, what are the causes in the Labour view? Family breakdown could be one. Presumably poverty would be a big Labour talking point when it comes to crime. What else? Because it's very easy to say, sounds very nice, doesn't it? We'll clamp down on the causes of crime, then we won't need to do so much of the punishment. But what does it actually mean?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's about looking at the cause of crime, which the biggest indicator and the biggest increase in crime is always seen when there is an increase in poverty. And especially poverty around young people and where young people grow up. It's just a clear indicator. And I don't think even the political parties disagree on that point, to be honest, for the large part. Now, it is about how you deal with that in the immediate term, because there is this kind of individual attitude of, well, the individual still chose to do the crime and they should be punished for that. But as a society, really, punishment doesn't make sense, does it, really? Because people don't get rehabilitated, and it doesn't deal with the core root effect of that. We're still locking up drug addicts in this country, drug users, people who choose to take a substance in their own body which affects only them, and they're choosing to do that, and we lock them up in a prison for that, take away their rights, and then put them back out on the streets after making them kind of, in a space, share space with other criminals, which is more likely to get them into more advanced crimes. So look at that, and then you see these problems of overcrowding, and can we really afford to be locking people up who don't need to be there? So that is people like myself.
But
in the
James,
Labour Party.
the government had been trying to build more prisons. What they've run into is these constraints. Because, of course, whether it's the Market Harbour prison or the Chorley super prison that were being planned, local campaigners have said, no, we don't want a prison here. They've used environmental regulations, they've used the planning system, even badgers. Badgers have been cited as a reason why prisons can't be built. The Labour Party's not going to get rid of those environmental regulations. Frankly, they're going to run into the same problems this government has.
Yeah, I can promise you that the Labour Party won't be getting rid of badgers anytime soon, Tom. However, the thing with this, I think, is the crucial attitude with Labour trying to get the country moving again with that planning reform. They've talked about this quite a lot, and people aren't really interested in it. I talk to friends and family, and they're like, well, it's planning reform. What does it mean? But I think that they don't realise how huge this will be for the country, because opening up those kind of bureaucratic routes at local government at the moment that are kind of, build and there's all sorts of backlogs of things, planning permissions that have been
James, I don't quite see how you're going to protect every single badger, Warren, and also bulldoze through the planning restrictions. It seems those two things you can't really meet between. They seem a bit yeah,
I do think so. But simply, I don't want to sound like I'm simplifying it, but just don't build prisons where there's badgers. It seems to be that it's straightforward. If you want to
I don't know. Maybe I'm off kilter here. But I'd say keeping violent criminals in prison possibly more important than
violent criminals.
Badgers. Yes. But we are a country of animal lovers. I know we are indeed. James Mathieson, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this afternoon, former Labour Party spokesman.
I think what we've got to do is find the criminals who've killed some badgers and say we need to lock these people up, but we can't unless we have to put badgers below humans. Anyway, I'm sure there's a snappy solution to find there. I'm not saying I've got the soundbite.
Anyway, let us know. Would you prioritise badgers over prisons? Anyway, still to come. The Jay Slater mystery deepens as a new photo emerges. We'll speak to the journalist behind the scoop straight after your headlines with Sophia.
Emily, thank you. It's 12:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. Labour is making its final pitch with a message to voters that if they want change, they must vote for it. Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country, giving his party the mandate they need to repair what he called broken Britain. Boris Johnson returned to the campaign trail last night with a warning that a Labour victory means Britain electing most left-wing government since the war. In his first and final appearance of the election campaign, the former Prime Minister said giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would mean higher taxes.
If these polls are right, then at the very moment when this country has beaten COVID and beaten post-COVID inflation, at the very moment when we should be encouraging enterprise and growth and putting some money into home ownership and putting some money into people's pockets, Westminster is about to go in diametrically the opposite direction. And so none of us can sit back as a Labour government prepares to use a sledgehammer majority to destroy so much of what we have achieved, what you have achieved.
In other news, the former leader of the DUP will face a trial over allegations of historical sex abuse. A judge at Newry Magistrates Court said that this morning that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson and his wife, Lady Eleanor Donaldson, both have a case to answer in connection with the allegations. Sir Geoffrey is accused of 1 charge of rape, 4 of gross indecency and 13 charges of indecent assault between 1985 and 2008. And Andy Murray will play mixed doubles with Emma Raducanu at Wimbledon. It comes after the tennis star said yesterday he would not be competing in the men's singles tournament in what is his last Wimbledon. But Sir Andy said he would be competing in the doubles with his brother Jamie for the first time. He will now also team up with the former US Open champion Emma Raducanu. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 35 minutes past midday. Now, Boris Johnson has returned at the 11th hour to urge voters to vote Conservative.
Yes, he left it to the last minute, didn't
Really
he?
did.
Kept people hanging. The former Prime Minister was met with cheers at a Conservative Party rally yesterday. There he is with his usual hair.
They even chanted Boris, Boris, Boris. It was perhaps the most enthusiastic reception of any sort of Conservative campaigner that we've seen yet, but...
I wonder how Rishi Sunak feels when he sees that.
Yeah.
But not all of his party are as hopeful. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman says it's over for the Conservatives and that they should prepare for the reality and frustrations of opposition.
Well, GB News political correspondent Katherine Forer joins us now from the Conservative battle bus. And, Katherine, what's the mood aboard the bus?
Well, good afternoon, Tom and Emily. I haven't seen the Prime Minister yet. We'll be meeting up with him in the next hour or two, so I will report back. But, you know, it's really hard, isn't it? It's really hard. Finally, they've wheeled out Boris Johnson. Better late than never, perhaps, but also probably too little, too late. Of course, he spent most of the general election campaign on holiday, but he came back bolt out of the blue last night and was treated to a rock star welcome. Let's just take a little look at what he had to say.
I was glad when Rishi asked me to help. Of course I couldn't say no. And I'm here for one reason and one reason only, which is the same reason as all of you, all of us are here. We're here because we love our country. And whatever our differences, they are utterly trivial by comparison with the disaster we may face if these so-called opinion polls are right.
Love him or loathe him, he really does have a way with words, though, doesn't he? I'm just going to give you a couple of his other choice phrases. Don't let the Putinistas deliver the Corbynites. Of course, that's a reference to the fact that Nigel Farage of Reform was saying a week or so ago that the West had helped to provoke Russia, and the Corbynistas, of course, a reference to Jeremy Corbyn, and he also takes a pop at Sir Keir Starmer, goes on to say, 5 years ago, you helped to send Jeremy Corbyn and his then disciple Keir Starmer into orbit, and we got Brexit done. Is it not then the height of insanity that if these polls are right, we are about to hand a supermajority to Labour? But I thought it was really interesting that we did not see Boris Johnson with Rishi Sunak at any point, and at no point did Boris Johnson actually mention the current Prime Minister by name. So really interesting. And of course, this morning we've had Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride effectively admitting defeat and saying, you know, Labour's heading for an extraordinary landslide on a scale that, you know, has never been seen in this country before. And Suella Braverman, arch foe now of the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, I'm sure he could have done without her, a very unhelpful intervention from his point of view, and that she's written an opinion piece in the Telegraph saying that the election is already over and that they have to move to the right, and that the fact that they are being, she said, hemorrhaging votes to Nigel Farage is because basically they weren't right-wing enough. So, you know, they're going to get eaten alive on the right by Nigel Farage. They're also going to get eaten alive potentially by the Lib Dems down in the blue wall. So whatever they do now, it's looking very bleak. I have to say, though, still, certainly yesterday, the Prime Minister seeming very upbeat. But to be honest, he's one of the few Conservative people who still are.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Katherine Forer, for bringing us the very latest from the Conservative battle.
Oh, can I just ask one question, Katherine? Whereabouts in the world are you? Because I think this is the first time we've spoken to you where the connection is really rather brilliant. So the signal wherever you are, I think we all need to move there.
I know, it's a miracle, Tom, and I think of all my lives yesterday, I only had the first and the last that didn't get interrupted. I think I'm on the M4, I'm heading somewhere down south. To be honest, we often don't really have a clue where we are. I have to look on Google Maps to find out where we are, but long may the signal hold.
It's a pretty unique job, isn't it, reporting on these battle buses. Thank you very much indeed, Katherine Forer, our political correspondent.
Good stuff. No, I said the M4.
You went on the battle bus, didn't you?
Yeah, I haven't been on the Tory. I've been on the Lib Dem one and the Labour one. Yeah, I was at the launch of the Lib Dem one. They call it Yellowhammer 1.
Yes.
Which, yeah, they have more gimmicks. They had lots of confetti when they revealed the name of the bus. And it took everyone a little second to think, what Yellowhammer 1? What's Yellowhammer 1? That was the name of the Brexit no-deal preparation operation that the Treasury engaged in 2019.
Well, there you go.
Which I'm not sure is going to light the country on fire ahead of the general election, but, you know.
Well, let us know what you think. Is it a done deal tomorrow? Is it a done deal? Do you think the polls reflect the mood of the nation? Let us know, gbnews.com/your say. Do you think Reform will get as much as 20% of the vote? That's what Matt Goodwin and his poll suggests. Could the Conservatives be on as little as 18%? 18%?
Yeah.
But now for an update on the search for missing teenager Jay Slater.
A new picture has emerged showing the man who was renting the Airbnb which Slater visited just hours before he vanished.
Yes, the image, which comes from the Daily Mail, shows a Brit who uses the name Ayub Abdul. Abdul booked the holiday rental online for £40 per night and later hosted the missing teenager shortly before he disappeared.
Well, joining us now is the senior global reporter at the Mail Online, Nick Pisa. Because, Nick, this is a pretty crucial piece in the puzzle.
It is. I suppose it's out there and it's people can maybe recognise him and maybe they can contact the authorities and say what they know about him. Although we should add the caveat that police have actually ruled out these two gentlemen of having any involvement in Jay's disappearance. But it's interesting to know that finally we get this this piece of the puzzle has come out, and we now know the identity of these two people, or one of these two people that Jay was with on that night in all the early hours of June the 17th when he was last seen driving away from the Papagayo nightclub in Playa de Americas up towards the village of Masca with these two men.
So the police have ruled them out of the investigation, though. So how significant is this?
Well, see, yeah, they've ruled them out of the investigation. But then yesterday, when I was up at Masca, the police were back at the Airbnb where Jay had stayed with these two men for a couple of hours on the morning of June the 17th, and from where he'd sent the Snapchat images of himself on the doorstep back to his friends, and he sent another image of the view in front of him. He'd sent that to his friends. So they said that they weren't relevant, but then again, yesterday, as I say, the police were back in there. I saw them as they emerged from the house. They were wearing dust covers on their shoes. They said that they said to me that they couldn't actually go into any details of why they were there, but they were quite clearly looking for forensics. The only thing that I can think of is that we do know that a pair of sunglasses was found close on the route close to where Jay was last seen, or where his mobile phone last pinged. These were found by a British Army veteran who went out onto Masca, up to the Masca Gorge on Sunday morning to do a bit of searching himself. And he told me how he found these sunglasses, and he rang the Guardia Civil, the Spanish police, and was told to put them in a paper bag if possible, or wrap them into paper tissues, and not to put them in anything plastic, because apparently that creates humidity. and he was told to bring them in, and he was asked to give his DNA, and he was also asked to leave some fingerprints. Now, as he said to me, you know, they may have absolutely nothing at all to do with Jay. They may not be Jay's, but he said as a duty of care and due diligence as well for being up there, he thought he should pick them up and hand them into police. And I understand that police are looking at them, and possibly, we don't know because they're not revealing anything, maybe that's why they went back to the Airbnb to see if there's any element of DNA that they can perhaps link these glasses to the two men. But then again, that would, many fingerprints that can link these sunglasses to these two men. We just don't know.
And this is one of the most peculiar things, perhaps, about this case. We're so used to reporting on police investigations in the United Kingdom, where there are press conferences, where there's much more of an open culture with our police in terms of telling us what their leads are and where they are with an investigation. But the Spanish police seem to be so much more guarded about what they're actually doing.
That's right. Everything is covered by judicial secrecy. That's what they call it, and they slap that on so as to prevent any leaks from coming out. Any approaches to them are just met with the standard reply over the last, what are you today? Day 17, I think now, day 18 since he disappeared on June 17th. Any replies any request for comment from the Spanish police is met with the bog standard. The investigation is ongoing. All avenues are being looked at. In fact, on Saturday was the first time that we actually got any concrete evidence from them on the investigation when they said that these two men had been spoken to and they'd been ruled out of the investigation. So, as you said, it is very difficult to get a clear picture of what exactly is being looked at. But they seem to have been focused for the majority of those 2 weeks on that Masca Gorge. They say that his phone pinged from up that way, and that's why they were focusing their search with police dogs and with helicopters and drones in that area.
And this former police officer who worked on the Madeleine McCann case, he's been quite vocal.
Yes, that's Mark Williams-Thomas, isn't it? Yes, he's come out this morning and said that he's given a briefing to the family in which he suggests or he alleges that this disappearance of Jay Slater might have something to do with a Rolex watch that was stolen in the early hours of June the 17th. We should say there's no evidence to suggest that Jay was involved in this theft. It is all rumour and hearsay that's going around on social media. But there is some suggestion as well, yes, that maybe it's linked to that, but we don't know. And obviously, we've asked the police this, and what they keep saying is all avenues of investigation are being looked at.
And this is the problem. Yeah. There's so much rumour, there's so much speculation. Everybody on TikTok is now an armchair detective, and it would probably be helpful if we heard a little more from the people who are actually doing the investigating. But thank you so much for bringing us that update. Nick Pisa, a senior global reporter at the Mail Online.
Now, still to come, it's been another big day for the King and Queen in Scotland as they host events for the second day in Edinburgh for Holyrood Week. All the latest on that after this short break.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. The eastbound side of the M62, there's a breakdown between junctions 11 and 12. That's Birchwood towards the Eccles interchange, so towards the M60 turn-off. It's blocking a lane, causing 1 or 2 delays. The A429 in Warwickshire, the stretch between Banbury Road in Ettington and in Holford Foss Way. Now that is blocked and queuing at the scene of a collision. The M4 in Greater London on towards the elevated section, Hayes at 3 to Brentford at 2, stop-start for the best part of 40 minutes. And Camelford in Cornwall, Market Place, the A39. That remains shut between the Boscastle turn-off and the B3266, all due to an unsafe building. That's been the case since last Friday. Still no way through in both directions. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
Eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life.
We know we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, you know, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So yes, we need to help this age group so they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well, or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-saving things in the kitchen. You know, make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which are a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. You know, if you overget a milk or something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, there is an audience, there's obviously an appeal, there's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programs like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you know, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything, you don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 minutes to 1. Some royal news now.
Yes, some royal news. King Charles has appeared in Edinburgh today for the second day of Holyrood Week, taking part in a ceremony which saw the Queen installed as a member of the Order of the Thistle, Scotland's greatest order of chivalry.
Well, it's part of only 2 days of royal engagements for the annual visit, which has been cut short due to the general election.
Right, well, let's find out more from our royal commentator, Richard Fitzwilliams, today. Richard, tell us more about this.
Well, the Royal Week is always one of the premier features of the royal year, centred at Holyrood House. And this year, it's been crammed into 2 days, but nonetheless, there are some particularly significant events. You mentioned the Order of the Thistle. We can, in fact, see it here. It's the premier order of chivalry in Scotland, second only to the Order of the Garter. It dates back to James VII of Scotland in 1687. It's limited to 16, plus the monarch and members of the royal family. And what is especially significant is that Queen Camilla is being installed as a member, and so is Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh. It was a recognition of his service, which has been considerable when he turned 60. And also there are 3 new members, Baroness Kennedy, Baroness Black and Sir Geoffrey Palmer. So quite an event. And also there's a magnificent chapel. I've been there in St Giles's Cathedral for the order. It includes rather entertaining details like angels playing bagpipes.
Now, this is, of course, all going to be cut short due to the general election. Do we know where the King will be for Friday morning? If the King has to appoint a new Prime Minister, which is likely to be the case according to just about every single opinion poll under the sun, would the new Prime Minister have to go up to Scotland, or will the King be likely to be back down in England?
Good question.
The King will ensure that he is at Buckingham Palace to receive the new Prime Minister, if there is one, and also, if necessary, take leave of the departing Prime Minister. It tends to be the case now that the departing Prime Minister can bring his family, which I think is rather a charming touch. There used to be the phrase kissing hands, whereby the King or Queen received the Prime Minister, and according to Tony Blair in his memoirs, he actually went along with possibly the fantasy that this still existed. He was told that you brush the sovereign's hand with your lips, but apparently Blair tripped on the carpet and according to his account, felt rather more of the Queen's hand than he was expecting.
Goodness me. You don't expect that from someone who's normally so slick with his media presentation, stumbling and falling. I can think of a few Prime Ministers who I think probably would have stumbled, but my goodness me. Good to know, and I'm sure Sir Keir Starmer, having been knighted, of course, at Buckingham Palace, will have been brushing up on the royal protocol if he is indeed to win. Richard Fitzwilliams, thank you so much for bringing us all of that. An exciting royal couple of days too.
Indeed, we've got so much more to come. We're on the campaign trail, of course, one day ahead of the election. Also, Andy Murray and Emma Raducanu will team up in Wimbledon's mixed doubles. More on that very shortly.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a cloudy day for most of us today. Rain and drizzle moving in from the west. A bit of a brighter start across eastern areas. That's because we've got a slight ridge ahead of the weather fronts, bringing that cloudy and damp weather, but it will arrive later on today. And behind it, it will turn much clearer as we head into this afternoon across northwestern areas, but still some spells of quite wet weather, drizzly rain, particularly over the high ground and coast. We could see some fog and mist around as well throughout this afternoon across western areas of Wales, down into southwest England as well. Brighter across central and eastern areas, highs of around 20 degrees, so not feeling too bad, but actually across the northwest, when that rain does clear through, the winds are really going to pick up as we head into this evening and into Thursday as well. And we'll also start to see some pretty heavy showers moving in. There is a risk of thunderstorms with these showers moving into northwestern areas of Scotland, as well as some northern areas of Northern Ireland. Now, the band of rain will likely sit slightly across northeastern areas of England, central areas of England as well into this evening, and there'll be quite a lot of cloud round across the south and east, but across Wales and southwest England starting to brighten up a little bit here. But that breezier weather will become more widely felt as we head towards Thursday. So a clearer night to come, some clear spells, mainly dry for many southern and central areas, but these showers will continue to push in, particularly across northwestern Scotland and some southwestern areas of Scotland as well. So a slightly fresher start tomorrow with those clearer skies tonight, but tomorrow will be a much brighter day, more in the way of sunshine for southern and central areas, and it should stay dry through much of the day, but frequent showers will still move in for western areas of northwestern England, Scotland and some parts of Northern Ireland as well. And we could see gale force winds as well as we head into the afternoon. So a fresh feeling afternoon in the north, a little bit warmer in the south with highs of around 21 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
You're joking. Really? Seriously? It's not a line. What is it?
I'm slipping neck. Oh dear.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. Like I said, I've never won anything like this. That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon. Thank you.
For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Recent polling suggests dentistry has become the hardest NHS service for patients to access, within NHS treatments still 15% lower than pre-pandemic levels. So a YouGov survey reveals that more than 70% of Brits describe seeing the dentist as difficult, compared with 64% for GPs and 42% for A&E services. One British man, get this, he even took to flying 10,000 miles for dental care, saying the extra time and money spent was far less hassle than trying to get an appointment on the NHS. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. And a shocking 1/5 of UK adults have also admitted to trying DIY dentistry, including the old trick of tying string around a wobbly tooth and slamming it in the door so it comes out. So should people be more careful when taking their teeth into their own hands.
That is one of the problems. Obviously, population growth makes it much more difficult for people to access NHS services, but they need to then catch up on the other side with dental services and increase the amount of dentists and access to dentistry, and especially NHS dentistry, obviously.
What's the cut-off age for free dentistry on the NHS?
So it is 18 years old, but there are exemptions around maternity, pregnancy. There's some free care around pregnancy.
We saw some data a few weeks back about the number one cause for child admission into A&E is tooth decay. I mean, that was shocking when I read it.
It's really bad, and what happens is people, kids with multiple decayed teeth, they basically have to be put under general anaesthetic, and then all those rotted teeth have to be extracted under general anaesthetic. Like, if those baby teeth start going crooked, then the adult teeth start going crooked as well. So it is important to look after the baby teeth. It's really important. I think they should make it more central to their policies, definitely.
The People's Channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 3rd of July. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Now, with just hours to go before Brits cast their vote, who will get the keys to number 10? We'll take a look at some shock new polling results. And remember, your ID.
And Boris is back, urging voters to stick with the Tories and reject the Putinistas and Corbynistas. But has his message been undermined by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman? The former Home Secretary says this election could spell the end for the Conservative Party.
Plus, is this the key to British success at this year's Wimbledon? Former champion Andy Murray is to team up with former US Grand Slam winner Emma Raducanu in the mixed doubles. That's a great team.
Cracking.
Emma Raducanu, Andy Murray, good stuff.
I mean, it's going to be quite emotional, I think, for a lot of people there. Andy Murray has been at the top of British tennis for more than a decade and a half, 2 decades, I don't know.
A long time.
Long time.
A long time he's been in the game.
When he won that Olympic gold, that was a real moment. It was quite early in his career, if I remember correctly, and it was. There's a long joke that goes, right, that Andy Murray is often referred to as a Scottish tennis player until he starts winning, when he's referred to as a British tennis player.
We can all own him. The United Kingdom.
No, absolutely. Team GB.
The Team GB, Team GMP. Yeah, he did struggle a little bit with a relationship with fans along the way.
Yeah.
But he's become more and more loved, I'd say.
Yes, I think. I mean, how can you not love someone who keeps winning and winning for your country? I mean, yeah. Even though people said he was moody to start off with, I think. He has been a bit of a British institution. Not just him, but his brother, his mother as well, all part of this sort of tennis super family.
But yes, sir, the politics matters very much too. As you say, what is it, 17 hours now till the polling stations open?
Yeah, I think it's 18. Just trying to do the maths quickly in my head. Yes.
Something like that.
Something like
less than 24, that's for sure.
Definitely less than 24. I think it's 18 hours now until 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, and that's when the polls open, and that's when we can't talk about politics on television. This is the last Good Afternoon Britain where we can talk during the election campaign. There are all these sorts of restrictions on polling day about what you can actually say, lest it influence people's votes.
Yes, it's all very strange in a world with social media and the like, but those are the rules. Those are the rules. So tomorrow will be full of lots of chat about other things.
Yes.
Sports, a little bit of showbiz, a little bit of social issues, debates and all of that. It will still be very interesting indeed and entertaining, I'm sure.
I'm looking forward to seeing all of the pictures of dogs at polling stations.
Yes.
That's about as close to politics as we can get tomorrow, just showing pictures of dogs at polling stations.
Cats, ferrets, whatever else, your pet hedgehog. Badgers. Yes, badgers. But yes, we've been told to remind everyone that you will need to bring your voter ID with you to the polling station. So don't forget that, because you'll have to go home and go grab it again.
Well, send your views and post your comments. Visit us at gbnews.com/your say. We'll get to some of those this hour. That's after your headlines with Sophia.
Tom, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom at 1:02. Your headlines. Political parties are making their final pitches to voters ahead of tomorrow's election, with Labour saying that if people want change, they must vote for it. Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country, giving his party the mandate they need to repair what he called broken Britain.
We are fighting for every vote, and across the country there will be constituencies which will go down to the wire. And therefore we will continue to fight until 10 o'clock tomorrow night, making the case that change only happens if you vote for it. But it is a huge opportunity for our country. This is the opportunity to turn the page and to move forward. And I want people to go out and vote for change and be part of the change that I think will bring about such a different and better future for our country.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson returned to the campaign trail last night with a warning that Labour victory means electing Britain's most left-wing government since the war. In his first and final appearance of the election campaign, the former Prime Minister said giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would mean higher taxes.
These polls are right. Then at the very moment when this country has beaten COVID and beaten post-COVID inflation, at the very moment when we should be encouraging enterprise and growth and putting some money into and home ownership and putting some money into people's pockets, Westminster is about to go in diametrically the opposite direction. And so none of us can sit back as a Labour government prepares to use a sledgehammer majority to destroy so much of what we have achieved, what you have achieved.
The enthusiasm seen amongst the crowd at last night's rally will give hope to some Conservatives of a surprise last-minute boost. Boris Johnson led the Conservatives to a substantial win 4.5 years ago, but his 11th-hour entrance may not be enough to claw back any of Labour's significant poll lead. Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride accepts the defeat is now likely, but says only voters can decide the final outcome.
If you look at the polls, it's pretty clear that Labour at this stage are heading for an extraordinary landslide on a scale that has probably never, ever been seen in this country before. And that is why I think it's so important that Boris's message, my message, the Prime Minister's message is, you know, this is not a by-election tomorrow. This is going to set what happens for the next 5, maybe 10 years. Let's have a parliament that can hold the government to account.
Meanwhile, the Lib Dems are telling voters the election is a chance to build a caring nation. The party says they've struck a balance between fun and serious in their campaign and insists its message on health, social care and cleaning up Britain's water is resonating with voters. Reflecting on Boris Johnson's appearance at the Conservative rally last night, Sir Ed Davey said it's time to move on.
It's bizarre that the Conservatives are reminding people of the failures. I think people want to move on from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak and all the damage they've done to our country. And they want to know what you're going to do in the future, how you're going to change our country, particularly how you're going to sort out NHS and care. And that's what Liberal Democrats are talking about. We want to make sure we build a caring nation where the importance of social care and family carers is really at the front, so we can both give them the support they need, but also transform our NHS at the same time by investing in care.
To other news now, the former leader of the DUP will face a trial over allegations of historical sex abuse. A judge at Newry Magistrates Court said this morning that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson and his wife, Lady Eleanor Donaldson, both have a case to answer in connection with the allegations. Sir Geoffrey is accused of 1 charge of rape, 4 of gross indecency, and 13 charges of indecent assault between 1985 and 2008. Hurricane Beryl is still swirling towards Jamaica after the powerful Category 4 storm flattened homes across several islands. At least 3 people were killed as the storm inflicted large-scale damage with winds of 145 miles an hour. The ferocious storm comes unusually early in this year's hurricane season. Scientists say the rapid pace of its approach is partly due to climate change. It's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and storm surges. And the King and Queen are in Scotland for their annual Holyrood Week. His Majesty joined Queen Camilla at a service in Edinburgh celebrating the Order of the Thistle at St Giles's Cathedral. The Prince of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were also in attendance for an extra special service as the Scottish capital celebrates 900 years. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, and more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, it's a big day in politics, day before the ballot box opens. The polling stations are ready to go, and Boris Johnson has made a return at the 11th hour to urge voters to vote Conservative.
Yes, the former Prime Minister was met with cheers at a Conservative Party rally yesterday, but not all of his party are as hopeful. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman says it's over for the Tories and they should prepare for the reality of opposition.
Well, let's discuss this further with local government editor of Conservative Home, Harry Phibbs, who joins us now. Harry, it's interesting, isn't it, rolling out Boris Johnson at the last minute? Why do you think he did it now?
Well, I think that there's a bit of drama having a last-minute intervention. I think that would have probably been done by agreement. But a lot of people that I've talked to in different parts of the country that have been canvassing for the Conservatives, when they knock on doors, have come across people who say they voted Conservative in the past, but they feel that Boris Johnson was unfairly treated, that it was disloyal of the Conservatives to oust him, that there wasn't sufficient justification over it, you know, or they're sort of ambushed by a cake and all that. And so I think that in terms of trying to get those voters back into the fold and persuade them to vote Conservative, obviously Boris Johnson himself coming out with this very strong, emphatic plea will have some benefit. I'm not saying it's going to transform it, but you know, if you get the Conservatives get an extra point or two in the polls, it all helps. It all makes a difference.
Perhaps, although of course there's maybe a reason that the Prime Minister didn't want to bring out Boris Johnson until this last minute, literally the night before the vote. Is it because Boris Johnson particularly isn't all that popular in the country? In fact, it's hard to think of a single politician alive today who is reasonably popular in the country. This is a particularly dark time for our politics.
Yes, and I think that makes Boris, his qualities contrast very strongly, don't they? Of optimism, of good humour, self-confidence, resilience. I think it's also why Nigel Farage has had a big impact in terms of being a charismatic politician. That if you get Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak coming across as offering alternative brands of technocratic managerialism, that isn't particularly emotionally uplifting. So I think it's a shrewd move of the Conservative. Of course, he's a divisive figure, Boris Johnson. Of course, a lot of people are hostile towards him. But I think in terms of reconnecting with disillusioned Conservatives, I think there's a chunk of them that he will have managed to do that with, and I think that will be of some benefit to them.
Of course, it may be that Boris Johnson didn't want to help Rishi Sunak up to this point. As you mentioned at the start, there was quite a lot of beef potentially between the two, Rishi Sunak accused of stabbing him in the back a couple of times. It could be that Boris Johnson, seeing the polls, thought, you know what, I've got to show my loyalty to the Conservative Party and at least help right before people go to the ballot.
Yes, and of course, after Liz Truss went, there was, if you remember, for a time it looked quite likely that Boris Johnson was going to make a comeback, and he sort of flew in and basically offered his services, and even then felt that there wasn't enough support in terms of Conservative MPs rallying round him for it to be a viable proposition. So that, I mean, there must be some element of him thinking, you know, well, you did have your chance, and I gave you another chance, and you've spurned me. But one would hope that there's also a belief in certain causes, a belief in Brexit obviously is strong for him, a belief in wanting the Ukrainians to defeat Putin, want a belief in freedom and free enterprise, and that therefore it would be a bit petty for him to just purely be thinking, "Oh, we'll serve you right." And so I think that he's probably genuine that he's wanting the Conservatives to do as well as possible.
And yet, Harry, the Conservatives are not going to do as well as possible. If we look at any single opinion poll, and it is actually fairly rare that every single opinion poll under the sun is telling the same story, yes, to different degrees, but the same story, which is the largest Labour majority in this country's history and the lowest number of Conservative seats since that party was founded in 1834.
Yes, and I think as you've been discussing, the curiosity could be that we get this incredible Labour landslide, with Labour perhaps getting below 40% of the vote. I think Matt Goodwin was talking about 36%. I mean, that would be an astonishing thing. And for people like me who defend the first past the post system, because we want to have a clear government rather than sort of endless sort of coalitions and all the sort of messy deal breaking behind closed doors. I think it will be a struggle for us to defend the first past the post if we do get that astonishing Labour landslide, particularly if because of tactical voting the Lib Dems then form the main opposition, and it's a sort of bogus opposition because the Lib Dems and Labour agree on everything, really, wanting a bigger state, more woke stuff, a great sort of climate change alarmism with net zero, more signing up to European Union rules. The idea we have a Labour government and the Lib Dems as the supposed opposition, completely agreeing with them about everything, would be a pretty unsatisfactory democratic outcome, to put it mildly.
OK, well, Harry Phibbs, thank you very much indeed for your insight. You're from Conservative Home, of course. And Suella Braverman today essentially suggesting that the Conservatives have lost so many votes to the Reform Party, and that's really where they're hemorrhaging votes. I mean, Matt Goodwin's poll there, 20% the Reform Party on. Suella thinks the Conservatives should go more to the right. Of course, some people will say the Conservatives are too right. So it's a tricky one. Yeah, that conversation will be one that will last a long time, I'm sure.
Certainly, I've got a theory that they've done both. They've used very right-wing rhetoric and very left-wing policy, and therefore have alienated both groups of potential voters.
Yes, talking so tough on immigration and then to have record-high legal migration. Same with illegal immigration.
Well, let's cross to the Lib Dems now, where Sir Ed Davey is making the most of his final day of campaigning after a stunt-filled few weeks. Let's cross to our very own Mark White, who's following the Lib Dems around today in Winchester. Mark, what's Sir Ed up to?
Well, Ed was just meeting activists here in Winchester, hammering home that message, really, of support for carers, that £9 billion extra that the Liberal Democrats would like to make available to both up the personal allowance for carers and also increase the amount of money that care workers get as well. And there is a real spring in his step, I have to say, a real sense of energy from the leader of the Liberal Democrats. That might be something to do with, of course, all these bungee jumps and water slides and surfboarding that he's been doing in recent weeks. And exclusively we can reveal as well that there is one final stunt planned for later this afternoon. The Liberal Democrats are staying very tight-lipped as to what that might be. Skydiving, we never know. But that's going to happen later on this afternoon. As far as the party is concerned, well, of course, the talk is, will they become again the third party in UK politics? Well, they've been doing their own research, of course, like all of the other parties, and Ed Davey was telling the activists here that they are doing extremely well at the moment. They believe in the home counties and also the positive feedback they're getting in the West Country as well, perhaps no surprise as a Lib Dem stronghold over there. But it's certainly possible that come the end of the election, the polling tomorrow evening, that we find that the Liberal Democrats do go into that third position. But when you ask Ed Davey about that, as we did a little earlier, of course, the remaining fairly coy and cue the "we're taking nothing from granted" soundbites. This is what he said a little earlier.
Well, we're not complacent. We want to make sure we work through to 10 p.m. tomorrow to make sure we earn the votes. But across the home counties in former Tory heartlands, what I've called the Blue Wall, in the West Country, across rural Britain, in rural Wales, rural Scotland, rural England, we're finding so many former Conservatives switching to us. I hope that Liberal voices can be heard much more strongly. As the fourth party, we've not been able to have so many parliamentary questions, particularly Prime Minister questions, or get so much media coverage.
Just to reiterate that very important breaking news, there will be one final stunt from the Lib Dem leader later this afternoon. We're not told what it will be, but I'm sure it will be spectacular. That has been the calculation of the Lib Dems. They knew they would be vying to get much in the way of attention during this campaign, so they've decided to go all out for show-stopping stunts to ensure that, of course, they get some airtime and at the same time get the important messages like more money for carers out there as well.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Mark White, you're with the Liberal Democrats in Winchester.
This afternoon, the mystery stunt. I am unreasonably excited for what this mystery stunt might be.
Why?
We've seen Ed Davey do so much. I thought the pinnacle would be the bungee jumping. I will be mightily, mightily disappointed if it doesn't one-up bungee jumping. I mean, what could it possibly be? Mark White suggested perhaps a skydive.
Your enthusiasm is very sweet. It's very sweet.
Well, I mean,
I don't know, maybe he'll drive a fast car. Maybe he'll do something with animals.
Already held a chicken.
Yeah, he's held a chicken, and so have you, haven't you?
Yeah, I was there on the farm.
There you go, having lots of fun. Maybe he'll do an extreme sport. Maybe he'll go to a ski centre.
I want to see
do some downhill ski racing, you know, why not?
That would be
skateboarding. See, look, lots of ideas.
Yeah, he
Zumba.
Could eat fire, walk on hot coals.
Yeah, well...
I mean, this has been one of the most remarkable campaigns from any political party. It's taken almost to an extreme, this idea that all you need to do is be noticed by the public. Not actually say all that much, but just get on the television
I don't know, they've been
screens.
quite strategic with the issues, haven't they? Sewage, that is a big issue in those key seats that
Can anyone name their policy on sewage?
Well,
other than they don't like it.
Exactly, they want it to stop.
A very detailed policy offer, I'm sure.
Also, should say that Christopher Hope is going to be sitting down with Nigel Farage of the Reform Party a little later on. I think that'll be showing this evening.
Yes, indeed, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
But still to come, we're going to be heading stateside, where pressure is building on Joe Biden. Yes, there's another election in parallel with our own. Will he withdraw from the presidential race? You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The Royal Academy's annual exhibition has returned for the 256th time to brighten the summer holidays. It's the world's oldest open submission exhibition. Anyone can enter work to be considered for inclusion. I'm joined now by art critic J.J. Charlesworth for his verdict. What is your verdict?
My verdict is you should go and see it. You are confronted with many things of varying quality, selected by artists, and you very much, instead of being given something to you that's supposed to be good, you have to make your own decision.
I went along yesterday, and I personally did see some pictures on the wall that I thought were absolutely stunning. I'm going to mention Peter Ucker, which I think is a remark. And now these are the two by Ben Jonson, Grundtvig 1, and we've got one coming out of Berlin Pool. I think that's an absolutely stunning piece of work. And then Claire Douglas should be up. Here we are, Claire Douglas.
Yes.
Souvenir from the Anthropocene.
Yeah.
That last one, actually, a very witty painting.
A piece like that was really interesting. I think it caught a lot of people's eyes because it had very kind of humorous, slightly bleak take on post-Brexit Britain. It's set in this fictitious world of Brummington, which is a sort of loose satire on Birmingham. I thought it was a bit mean.
I think we had maybe Black Lives Matter. We had Boris Johnson. I think our own Jacob Rees-Mogg made his way into the painting.
Yeah, so there's definitely a slant, a political slant, on the part of the artist. But even that said, I thought it was an interesting and enjoyable work, even though maybe you don't agree with the artist on what they're trying to say. And I think that actually made for an interesting moment because you're seeing that people are disagreeing, right? Both through the artwork and in front of artworks.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 1. Now, as we were saying before the break, tonight at 7 o'clock on GB News, our very own political editor, Christopher Hope, has an interview with Nigel Farage in our final episode of Vote 2024, The Leaders.
So, yes, Nigel Farage tonight, 7 o'clock, only on GB News.
Now let's hop stateside because pressure is building on Joe Biden to step down from the presidential race as a Democratic congressman from Texas becomes the first national lawmaker from within the Democrat Party to publicly call for him to move aside.
Yes, the pressure does seem to be mounting, doesn't it? It comes as Biden blames his poor debate performance last week on travel exhaustion, going as far as to say he nearly fell asleep on stage.
Well, let's speak to Thomas Gift, the founding director of the UCL Centre on US Politics, because, Thomas, I think this is about the 7th excuse I've heard for why Joe Biden didn't do particularly well at the debates, that he was jet-lagged, he had his stammer, that it was after 6 o'clock in the evening. I mean, there were all of these different excuses, but fundamentally, this is someone who perhaps most Americans now see as just too old for the job.
Well, I completely agree with you. And the most recent data that I have seen suggests that almost 3 in 4 Americans think that Joe Biden doesn't have the cognitive or physical capacity to carry out the duties of the presidency. That is really a stunning number. It's hard to overstate the concern to which that should lend for Democrats. I mean, you're also correct that the debate was bad enough, and then add to that all of these post-debate excuses, which look extremely weak. I don't know who's advising Biden on this, but he should just stop. He could also end the speculation right now by just holding a press conference and answering open questions, but he refuses to do that.
And Thomas, been reading in recent days that key donors to the Democrat Party are considering dropping out or have already pulled donations. Is that true?
Well, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. He has seen some increases in fundraising dollars from sort of nickel and dime donors. Some of these large donors, these deep-pocketed donors, I do think that they are going to stay with Biden as long as he suggests that he wants to be in the race, because they want influence and they want to advance their own interest. And if they think that Biden is the vehicle through which to do that, I think they're going to continue to spend money. But I do feel like you're going to see continued pressures, not only by kind of strategists and campaign operatives, but also from donors to say, look, we really need a different candidate.
But is this a watershed moment, this congressman saying that actually he's got to go? Is this going to be the first chink in the dam? Because I was actually surprised at how many people came out and said, you know what, Joe's our guy, he had a bad night, we've got to stick with him. President Obama said as much in a tweet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question whether this is just sort of going to open up the entire dam, and now you're just going to see floods of Democratic lawmakers and politicians saying that Biden needs to go. I do think that this is still Joe Biden's decision to make, and as long as he holds off making it, most Democrats are going to stick with him simply because they view the alternative, Donald Trump, as much, much worse. But you're absolutely right. You know, these norms around kind of backing the president, as soon as they're broken and people feel like they have permission to do so, you could see one politician turn into two, turn into three, turn into dozens, turn into the entire Democratic Party. So we'll just have to watch how that unfolds.
Now, how on earth would Joe Biden actually be removed as the presumptive nominee? Because, of course, he's not confirmed as the nominee until August and that Democratic National Convention. What is the actual process to dislodge and perhaps hold a very short election or indeed a coronation?
So basically, for all intents and purposes, Biden would have to step down as the candidate and release what are called pledged delegates, which were all accumulated during the primaries. Currently, you know, Joe Biden holds about 95% of those delegates because he was not opposed. And if he said, I release you, you can vote for whoever you want, then it would really be a free-for-all. Biden could choose to endorse one candidate, but that certainly wouldn't guarantee that that individual would win. I think more than likely, though, he would just say, I'm going to let the process unfold. So these are kind of Democratic Party leaders who at the convention would be behind the scenes, negotiating, jockeying for position, lobbying for their own favored candidate, and there would essentially just be a vote. But it would be a very messy process. It would be chaotic, and I do think that what Democrats would be concerned about is appearing disunited going into the election against Trump.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed. Thomas Gift, founding director at the UCL Centre on US Politics. Always great to speak to you.
Nice to see that it's not just our politics that is this dysfunctional, isn't it?
And a lot going on in France as well.
Goodness me, the whole Western world. The only guy sitting pretty at the moment is Xi Jinping. Well...
I was going to say long may that last, but I'm not sure about that.
Is that why you're wearing red?
I'm wearing red because it looks nice with the studio we've got here.
It's not your allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party.
No allegiance is here, that's for sure.
Very good. Well, still to come, exciting news for tennis fans as Andy Murray announces that he's to team up with Emma Raducanu for the mixed doubles. Is this the key for British success at Wimbledon? You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
It's 1:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. First, to breaking news. Essex police have confirmed that no criminal offences were committed by Reform UK activists while they were campaigning for Nigel Farage. It's after they were filmed by an undercover journalist for Channel 4. The force said they've assessed the comments made during the programme and other information provided to them, but they've concluded no offences took place. To other news, Sir Keir Starmer says that a speech by Boris Johnson last night is a reminder of chaos and division. Labour is making its final pitch with a message to voters that if they want change, they must vote for it. The party's leader says the majority would be better for the country, giving his party the mandate they need to repair what he called broken Britain.
We are fighting for every vote, and across the country there will be constituencies which will go down to the wire. And therefore we will continue to fight until 10 o'clock tomorrow night, making the case that change only happens if you vote for it. But it is a huge opportunity for our country. This is the opportunity to turn the page and to move forward. And I want people to go out and vote for change and be part of the change that I think will bring about such a different and better future for our country.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson returned to the campaign trail last night with a warning that a Labour victory means electing Britain's most left-wing government since the war. In his first and final appearance of the election campaign, the former Prime Minister said giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would mean higher taxes. And the King and Queen are in Scotland for their annual Holyrood Week. His Majesty joined Queen Camilla at a service in Edinburgh, celebrating the Order of the Thistle at St Giles's Cathedral. The Prince of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were also in attendance. And this year is extra special as the Scottish capital celebrates 900 years. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2706 and €1.1813. The price of gold is £1,845 and 34 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,163 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a cloudy day for most of us today. Rain and drizzle moving in from the west. A bit of a brighter start across eastern areas. That's because we've got a slight ridge ahead of the weather fronts, bringing that cloudy and damp weather, but it will arrive later on today. And behind it, it will turn much clearer as we head into this afternoon across northwestern areas, but still some spells of quite wet weather, drizzly rain, particularly over the high ground and coast. We could see some fog and mist around as well throughout this afternoon across western areas of Wales, down into southwest England as well. Brighter across central and eastern areas, highs of around 20 degrees, so not feeling too bad, but actually across the northwest, when that rain does clear through, the winds are really going to pick up as we head into this evening and into Thursday as well. And we'll also start to see some pretty heavy showers moving in. There is a risk of thunderstorms with these showers moving into northwestern areas of Scotland, as well as some northern areas of Northern Ireland. Now, the band of rain will likely sit slightly across northeastern areas of England, central areas of England as well into this evening, and there'll be quite a lot of cloud round across the south and east, but across Wales and southwest England starting to brighten up a little bit here. But that breezier weather will become more widely felt as we head towards Thursday. So a clearer night to come, some clear spells, mainly dry for many southern and central areas, but these showers will continue to push in, particularly across northwestern Scotland and some southwestern areas of Scotland as well. So a slightly fresher start tomorrow with those clearer skies tonight, but tomorrow will be a much brighter day, more in the way of sunshine for southern and central areas, and it should stay dry through much of the day, but frequent showers will still move in for western areas of northwestern England, Scotland and some parts of Northern Ireland as well. And we could see gale force winds as well as we head into the afternoon. So a fresh feeling afternoon in the north, a little bit warmer in the south with highs of around 21 degrees.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. The southbound M74 in Glasgow at the turn off Carlisle at Junction 3. Now, 2 lanes are combed off there. There's a medical emergency that's naturally causing traffic to tail back somewhat. Into Norfolk near the BP roundabout in Skull, the A413 between Low Road and Stuston Lane is closed and queuing. There's no return lorry there. A429 in Warwickshire shut both ways between Ettington and the Pillerton Priory turn off. If you're heading towards Halford, the investigation work continues, so slow going. Queuing into London for the M4, 3 miles worth of queues following an earlier broken down car just before Brentford at Junction 2. And staying in London, in Headington, the Uxbridge Road westbound, the A4020 blocked from Hayes End Road to Angel Lane and queuing. There's been a collision.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past 1. And now another twist at Wimbledon with the news that in the last hour, Andy Murray will play mixed doubles with Emma Raducanu.
Yes, so the British pair have been granted a wild card, with Murray looking to maximise his opportunities during his final appearance at the world's oldest tennis tournament.
Well, let's find out more from sports broadcaster Ben Jacobs, because Ben, bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I think Andy Murray wants to maximise this Wimbledon farewell. We know that he's playing in the men's doubles with his brother Jamie, and now the mixed doubles with Emma Raducanu. And the two of them have always had a great rapport. Murray has spoken for many years now of Raducanu's talent. And his logic is essentially that due to back problems and a cyst in particular that was causing nerve pain, it was too difficult to enter in the singles because that's more strenuous, whereas doubles requires a different kind of stamina and physicality, and ultimately Murray feels that he can handle both the men's doubles and the mixed doubles, and in doing so he's able to play with his brother and a great friend and bow out on a high and double his chances of ultimately winning a trophy. So this is great news. It will be an emotional farewell. And from Raducanu's point of view, she refers to Murray as Mr. Wimbledon. And I think what's intriguing about the partnership is she's also never played at a major Grand Slam in this format either. So they're entering as wild cards, and we now have to wait and see whether they can be dark horses to ultimately go all the way and bring us some British glory at Wimbledon.
Well, Ben, could they be a winning partnership? What's Emma Raducanu's form like at the moment?
Yeah, as I say, she's not really played at a major in this particular format. And when you look at singles, you can't really get too much of a guideline as to how in mixed doubles that will translate. What we know is that they're both great personalities and they've got a good rapport, and communication in this format is obviously keen. Murray loves scrambling around the baseline. He's a fantastic defensive player. He's got a big forehand too, so he'll definitely be effective when he has the ability to use a larger portion of the court, which of course you can do in that format. And Raducanu has got an excellent game at the net. They're both good servers too, so there's no reason why they won't be able to go on a run. Both of them have had their injury problems, so might be a little bit rusty. And when you've not played together as a partnership, that can obviously count against you as well. So they're going to have to get on that practice court between now and when the draw is made and they know who their opponents are, which will be later today. But hopefully they can create a fairy tale at Wimbledon.
So the draw is later today. When are they actually playing?
Well, we have to wait and see because the draw comes out and then the exact timings are apparent. But the mixed doubles starts in the next couple of days. The singles and obviously the qualification to get to the main draw is always first. The men's doubles match is likely to be before the first mixed doubles game as well. But in the next few days, that draw will become more apparent and then we'll have the exact timings.
Well, I'll be sure to watch. While we've got you, you're out in Germany for us. So Jude Bellingham, this disciplinary, well, is he going to have disciplinary action against him?
Yeah, I think Jude Bellingham's going to stick to his position, which was the gesture he made after scoring an incredible overhead kick, was an in-joke with friends, and it was a chirping kind of gesture, and then he screamed, "Who else?" And nobody's really suggesting that it was an insult against Slovakia or trying to rile opposition fans. It was heat of the moment. The precedent for this normally is a fine if he is found guilty. It could be a fine and a suspension, but I think that will be a stretch, and Bellingham's going to stick to his position. So best case scenario, the expectation is that he'll be found not guilty. Worst case scenario is a fine, not a suspension, even though the disciplinary panel do have the ability to both fine him and suspend him. But it would be a big surprise if he misses the game against Switzerland.
Yeah, I think people would really have some big things to say about that. After all, of the few goals that England has managed to score in this tournament so far, Jude Bellingham has been a rather key player there. So just very finally, if you were a betting individual, is England going to beat Switzerland?
I think so, because we can't get any worse, ultimately. And if that's not a wake-up call, scoring with 30 seconds remaining and then in 52 seconds into extra time, if this isn't the moment that turns England and gets them playing their best, then what will be? So I expect a better performance. They're favourites against Switzerland, and if they beat Switzerland, it's momentum. And suddenly, instead of saying we're going out, we start to pivot to the opposite extreme and say we can win the whole thing. So I'm quietly confident I think England will win.
Bit of a backhanded compliment there from you, Ben Jacobs, but I'll take it. Sounds optimistic, at least. Ben Jacobs, thank you very much. Indeed, you are, of course, a sports broadcaster.
Goodness me, well, I think we're all very much looking forward to that England game, and let's hope that it can be slightly less stressful than the one we saw on Sunday. Now, we're going to be back very shortly on board the Conservative battle bus. Just hours to go now until polls open. Can they do an England? And in the 11th hour, turn things around? Perhaps not likely. We'll be with Katherine Forer, our correspondent.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
I've got a grade 3 astrocytoma brain tumour. Once I was diagnosed, I tried to do my claim with my insurance company and was rejected. They then also cancelled my life insurance and also cancelled my wife's policies as well.
And this is Zurich Insurance,
This
John.
is Zurich,
and
yeah.
their point was, because you'd had some dizzy spells, which you hadn't told them about, they say dizzy spells equates to a brain tumour, which there's no evidence to support that.
I was with King's College Hospital. They ignored them. King's College Hospital were the experts.
So you were expecting £25,000?
Yeah, that was a critical illness claim.
Critical illness, because you've got a critical illness. Clearly, it couldn't be more critical, could it?
No.
Michelle, you've got a lovely poorly husband, and you're also worrying about paying the bills and what the future holds.
Yeah.
What impact is this having on you on a day-to-day basis?
I try not to think too much about the future because it does upset me. I'm kind of thinking, when John does go, I'm left with a mortgage to pay and 2 young children.
How old are your kids?
5 and 3.
Right.
So it's incredibly tough.
And are you working?
I haven't worked since having the children.
Right.
That's a decision we made when we had children.
In the grand scheme of things, this amount of money is a drop in the ocean for a company like Zurich.
Yes, because I think they could make all this go away.
I've read some of the statement. Zurich statement. We're sorry to hear of the very difficult circumstances Mr. Rendler's family are experiencing. You're terminally ill, and they're calling that difficult circumstances.
The People's Channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Well, moving away briefly from the politics, the Scouts Association waitlist has hit a record 100,000. Parents are seeking to help children develop self-esteem post-lockdown.
Well, demand for membership has skyrocketed, especially among 4 to 6-year-olds, leading to a critical need for more volunteer leaders.
Well, joining us now is Deputy UK Chief Volunteer CJ Ledger. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, CJ, this is a huge number of children waiting to join the Scouts. May I ask something that's perhaps a little controversial? Now, the Scouts used to be for boys. Am I right? And then the girls were allowed in, and now we've got these huge waiting lists. Is it that there are so many girls that now want to join the Scouts that there's not enough space?
Not at all. So good afternoon, everyone. I think that since
Scouts have been allowed to be girls and boys. Anyone's welcome at Scouts for more than 30 years. So I don't think that's really the problem. I think what it is more parents and more young people are wanting to take part in Scouts. The range of activities we have to offer, the different skills and activities, the experiences that being a Scout enables you to have. And now that you can join at 4 as a Squirrel Scout and last as a young person all the way through to 25, since lockdown, we're definitely seeing an increase in demand. Parents are looking for different activities for their young people to take part in, which are different from traditional either academic or sporting activities. And being a Scout allows you to take part in so many different things. What we really need are more adult volunteers who are willing to put their hands up and get involved in whatever way works for them.
How do you go about recruiting these adult volunteers? Is it generally when people sort of graduate on from the Scouts, they stick around? Or do you try and find new people who perhaps haven't done it for a few years?
It's both. I think if you're a young person, certainly that's my experience. I never left after being a young person in Scouts, but we really want anyone who wants to get involved. Quite often it's parents, particularly for our younger sections, squirrels, beavers and cubs, who offer to help. And sometimes that's just once a term or once a month. So any offers of help we'll take forward.
I didn't know there were squirrels. I was a cub and a Scout, but never a squirrel.
Oh, they're new section for 4 and 5-year-olds that we launched a couple of years ago because there was, again, a really increasing demand. And we know how important those non-academic, informal activities are for really young people at an early age. So the early years provision has proved to be really successful. And it's definitely driven a part of our waiting list, but there are people waiting to join at all ages. And Tom, I'm glad you were a cub and a Scout, and I hope you had fond memories. If you want to get involved as a leader, let us know.
I've got very fond memories of the 100th anniversary Jubilee Jamboree that I went to, which was absolutely marvellous.
But I grew up thinking, now forgive me, I grew up thinking that the Scouts was for the boys and the Brownies and the Guides were for the girls. Are the Brownies and the Guides now letting the boys in?
No, Girl Guiding is a separate organisation, although founded at a similar time to us as an all-girls, partly because of society at the time in 1910. But we've welcomed guides, we've welcomed girls to be Scouts since, well, in all sections since the mid-80s. And there have been girls in Scouts since about the 1960s as well. So we work really closely with what we call our sisters in guiding, and definitely do lots of activities. And there'll be cubs and brownies camping together. Locally to us, we had a big joint Scout and Guide camp last weekend, which saw 3,000 kids coming together. But Scouts is open to everyone and is quite different to Girl Guiding.
It's interesting what you say about lockdown and things like that, because that was a time where children had to spend a huge amount of time indoors, probably a huge amount of screen time too, not least when it came to, that was the only schooling they received was through the computer screen, really, or through their phones. I imagine that parents are so desperate for their children to, live a sort of normal life, get out there and actually do some activity. I know a lot of children put on weight during the lockdown too, so it's good in terms of exercise.
Absolutely. And as a parent of lockdown primary school children, I know that when they were both in beavers and cubs, so my daughter was a beaver and my son was a cub during lockdown, and they've obviously grown up since then. Our online scouting activities and camps from home definitely kept people engaged and doing activities which were offline as well as online. And I think you're absolutely right that since then, parents are looking for other activities which get them off screen. It's such an online generation. So much time can be spent on tablets and devices that Scouts and activities like ours that offer a range of activities with other people, learning those team building, resilience skills, leadership skills, cooking, even at quite young ages. I think parents are desperate for them to take part in a relatively low-cost, exciting activity. And so we're just asking for more parents and more adults just to put their hands up and get involved, especially if you've been a Cub or a Scout yourself, then would really welcome you back.
No, it sounds like a very, very good initiative. Just finally, are there particular areas where you are most in need? I'm fairly certain that it won't be a sort of uniform waitlist around the country. Where should people most be looking out for?
So it is relatively... Pretty much every Scout group across the country, of which we have about 7,000 across the UK, would welcome volunteers in different ways. I think urban conurbations, so in our inner cities and suburbia, where parents are possibly either working from home longer hours or having to get decommuting, I think is a particular challenge. But rural locations, villages and cities and towns, anywhere, basically, get involved. Have a look on our website, scouts.org.uk/join, and it will come up with loads of different opportunities for you to take part.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed for your time. Great to see your enthusiasm for the project. CJ Ledger, Deputy UK Chief Volunteer at the Scouts Association.
Yeah, I mean, I think scouting is one of those very, very good things where I don't think, and maybe it's changed since I was in it, but I don't think health and safety culture has quite got its arms completely around it yet. Children can still run around with sticks and use knives in a responsible way and be around fire and climb trees and abseil and do all the things that children should do without cotton wool around them.
And the only reason I raised the gender thing is because I feel like girls have their groups, you know, the brownies, the guides or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's very few things that are left just for boys. And I do think, you know, from speaking to young men and speaking to boys and older men too, that it is important for boys also to have their own space to do their own activities.
Yeah.
A sort of camaraderie, you know,
it's
so that there's no
interesting.
sort of resentment against the girls having everything.
Yes.
No? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm wrong.
It's seen as societally acceptable to have all women-only spaces, but not men-only spaces. I mean, the Garrick Club is
Even
no
the
longer
Garrick Club has 2
male-only.
women now.
I mean, is there anything that is left that is male-only in this country? I mean, it's hard to think.
Apparently even boys' choirs are sexist now.
Those boys' choirs have to have women in the boys' choirs.
A lot of them do. But anyway, yes, we'll get to some of your views on that, actually. But coming up, will the red wall hold? We're going to dig deep into some analysis
or indeed
of how this election
rebuilt.
Or be rebuilt, yes, more likely. Stay with us. We'll be back in a tick.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a cloudy day for most of us today. Rain and drizzle moving in from the west. A bit of a brighter start across eastern areas. That's because we've got a slight ridge ahead of the weather fronts, bringing that cloudy and damp weather, but it will arrive later on today. And behind it, it will turn much clearer as we head into this afternoon across northwestern areas, but still some spells of quite wet weather, drizzly rain, particularly over the high ground and coast. We could see some fog and mist around as well throughout this afternoon across western areas of Wales, down into southwest England as well. Brighter across central and eastern areas, highs of around 20 degrees, so not feeling too bad, but actually across the northwest, when that rain does clear through, the winds are really going to pick up as we head into this evening and into Thursday as well. And we'll also start to see some pretty heavy showers moving in. There is a risk of thunderstorms with these showers moving into northwestern areas of Scotland, as well as some northern areas of Northern Ireland. Now, the band of rain will likely sit slightly across northeastern areas of England, central areas of England as well into this evening, and there'll be quite a lot of cloud round across the south and east, but across Wales and southwest England starting to brighten up a little bit here. But that breezier weather will become more widely felt as we head towards Thursday. So a clearer night to come, some clear spells, mainly dry for many southern and central areas, but these showers will continue to push in, particularly across northwestern Scotland and some southwestern areas of Scotland as well. So a slightly fresher start tomorrow with those clearer skies tonight, but tomorrow will be a much brighter day, more in the way of sunshine for southern and central areas, and it should stay dry through much of the day, but frequent showers will still move in for western areas of northwestern England, Scotland and some parts of Northern Ireland as well. And we could see gale force winds as well as we head into the afternoon. So a fresh feeling afternoon in the north, a little bit warmer in the south with highs of around 21 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes, she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 3rd of July. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
With just hours to go now before Brits cast their vote, who'll get the keys to number 10? We'll reveal some shocking new polling results.
And Boris is back, urging voters to stick with the Tories and reject the Putinistas and Corbynistas. But has his message been undermined by Suella Braverman? The former Home Secretary says this election could spell the end for the Conservative Party.
And we're due to hear from Gareth Southgate as this hour his squad gears up for the showdown with Switzerland on Saturday. Will there be an update on the investigation into Jude Bellingham? We'll bring you that press conference live. Just 17 hours until the polls open. And what does that mean? I mean, people will be paying attention, I think, now to just what this race can mean, and perhaps waking up to this idea that this might well be the largest Labour majority in the history of the country.
And it's interesting to think about what that might mean in terms of policy. Of course, the Conservatives saying they want to cut taxes, the Labour Party saying they want to ring-fence some areas for absolutely no tax rises. Have they revealed all when it comes to the potential? We've heard from the IFS, for example, saying that none of the parties are being honest with us about what the tax burden might look like coming down the line.
And we've seen some of these extraordinary seat-level polls that don't just poll the 2,000 people that normally earlier in polls, but polls that poll tens of thousands of people, not just online, but by telephone as well. And they're painting an extraordinary picture. Out of a parliament that has 650 seats, the central projection from Survation is that the Conservatives will have fewer than 100, that they'll be nip and tuck with the Liberal Democrats to be the official opposition. Could you imagine Sir Ed Davey being there at Prime Minister's Questions each week, being the main guy that holds Sir Keir Starmer to account? It would be like perhaps the most aligned two parties.
There wouldn't be much ideological difference there, I don't suppose. Also, that polling that we dropped at the top of the show, 20% for reform. Now, that won't translate to 20% of seats, but it's a big share if that does come true. That's a big share of the vote. Could this election really have massive consequences, not only for the next 5 years, but for decades to come?
And yet the Labour Party is saying they're fighting for every single vote and they take nothing for granted. They're saying don't perhaps trust all of these polls, although, well, they are all telling the same story.
Well, question for you. Is it a done deal in your book? Have you decided how you're going to vote? Perhaps you've already done a postal vote. Let us know. Is it a done deal? Will there be a super majority for the Labour Party? gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch. But first, it's your headlines with Sophia.
Emily, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 3 minutes past 2. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Political parties are making their final pitches to voters ahead of tomorrow's election, as Rishi Sunak insists the race isn't over. Sir Keir Starmer says a big Labour majority would be better for the country, giving his party the mandate they need to repair what he called broken Britain.
We are fighting for every vote, and across the country there will be constituencies which will go down to the wire. And therefore we will continue to fight until 10 o'clock tomorrow night, making the case that change only happens if you vote for it. But it is a huge opportunity for our country. This is the opportunity to turn the page and to move forward. And I want people to go out and vote for change and be part of the change that I think will bring about such a different and better future for our country.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson returned to the campaign trail last night with a warning that a Labour victory means electing Britain's most left-wing government since the war. In his first and final appearance of the election campaign, the former Prime Minister said giving Sir Keir Starmer the keys to number 10 would mean higher taxes.
These polls are right. Then at the very moment when this country has beaten COVID and beaten post-COVID inflation, at the very moment when we should be encouraging enterprise and growth and putting some money into home ownership and putting some money into people's pockets, Westminster is about to go in diametrically the opposite direction. And so none of us can sit back as a Labour government prepares to use a sledgehammer majority to destroy so much of what we have achieved, what you have achieved.
Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are telling voters the election is a chance to build a caring nation. The party says they've struck a balance between fun and serious in their campaign and insists its message on health, social care and cleaning up Britain's water is resonating with voters. Reflecting on Boris Johnson's appearance at the Conservative rally last night, Sir Ed Davey said it's time to move on.
It's bizarre that the Conservatives are reminding people of the failures. I think people want to move on from Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak and all the damage they've done to our country. And they want to know what you're going to do in the future, how you're going to change our country, particularly how you're going to sort out NHS and care. And that's what Liberal Democrats are talking about. We want to make sure we build a caring nation where the importance of social care and family carers is really at the front, so we can both give them the support they need, but also transform our NHS at the same time by investing in care.
To other news now, the death of the 17-year-old who got into difficulty while swimming in West Sussex has been described as a tragic accident by his college principal. Emergency services were called to a beach in West Wittering near Chichester around 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon. The boy was part of a group from Uxbridge College in West London who were visiting the area to celebrate the end of term. The former leader of the DUP will face a trial over allegations of historic sex abuse. A judge at Newry Magistrates Court said this morning that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson and his wife, Lady Eleanor Donaldson, both have a case to answer in connection with the allegations. Sir Geoffrey is accused of 1 charge of rape, 4 of gross indecency and 13 charges of indecent assault between 1985 and 2008. Hurricane Beryl is still swirling towards Jamaica after the powerful Category 4 storm flattened homes across several islands. At least 3 people were killed as the storm inflicted large-scale damage with winds of 145 miles an hour. The ferocious storm comes unusually early this year's hurricane season. Scientists say the rapid pace of its approach is partly due to climate change. It's now moving towards Jamaica, where it's expected to batter the shoreline with life-threatening winds and storm surges. And the King and Queen are in Scotland for their annual Holyrood Week. His Majesty joined Queen Camilla at a service in Edinburgh, celebrating the Order of the Thistle at St Giles' Cathedral. The Prince of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were also in attendance for an extra special service as the Scottish capital celebrates 900 years. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
"16 hours and 52 minutes to go."
Tom,
that's the number
Tom.
until the polls open. Every second matters.
Political commentator Stella Santakitu joins us now. Thank you very much indeed, Stella. Yes, 17 odd hours to go until those polling stations are open, and tomorrow we'll be showing lots of pictures, I'm sure, of the dogs at polling stations, which is always very exciting, always the nicest thing really about election day. But Stella, how do you reckon things are going on the Labour front? I know they're your party. Have you been out and about campaigning? What's the word on the street?
Absolutely. Most relaxing campaign I've had in a very, very long time. I know Labour HQ is not going to thank me for saying that, but it has been such a good experience this time around. Whenever I'm with a new canvasser on the doorstep, I tell them to be very, very grateful because things didn't used to be this nice and positive, and people didn't used to be so friendly and welcoming to Labour canvassers some years ago.
That's certainly true, although there are some question marks over just how much the Labour Party has changed. Today we see a leaked recording from the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones. He's talking about inheritance tax, and these are the words that he used. There's a bulk coming through the system of huge amounts of inherited wealth in our country, largely off the back of housing asset values. He wants to redistribute that, taking money from families after a loved one has died. That doesn't sound like it's particularly moderate.
That is not actually what he said, Tom, because I looked at the story, and this is from a recording from a meeting in a village hall back in March. And this is a Labour junior minister. And what he actually said was, at Westminster, we considered abolishing inheritance tax, but we decided that this is not quite right. Now, this was back in March. That was before the Labour manifesto was announced. Since then, Labour has repeatedly said we will not be increasing inheritance tax. And the specific comments by the junior minister were that Labour is going to keep inheritance tax as it is, rather than that they are going to increase it, which is what is being suggested.
He said there'll be huge amounts of inherited wealth coming through the system.
Yes, which was going to come under Economic Exact Plan. He's not suggesting that any place. Now, but I will tell you what's my problem with this story, that even though this is an incredibly moderate and cautious statement that Darren Jones made, and I have to stress, I have to emphasize, this was a statement made in a meeting back in March. This is not in the Labour manifesto, and it's not saying anything new. we are still being held to ransom by millionaires, it seems to me, because this is who is going to be affected by this, not a change in the current government policy. Because even if it was a conservative government policy, this would still remain the case. They didn't abolish inheritance tax, as far as I'm concerned, did they?
But it's all about the direction of travel, though, isn't it? And you can say, oh, well, actually, it's not. It will keep the Labour Party will keep this policy the same. This isn't a big, dramatic, radical change. But it's about ideologically, the Labour Party will be more keen to tax your assets, tax wealth, tax inheritance than the Conservatives are. I mean, there's a difference in ideology there, Stella.
But ideologically, Rachel Reeves is one of the most right-wing politicians in the Labour Party. So ideologically, this is an extremely moderate Labour Party. This is an extremely moderate shadow cabinet, soon perhaps to be actual cabinet.
Stella, 3 years ago, Rachel Reeves was talking about doubling capital gains tax. And now we're talking about these asset values where Darren Jones is saying this bulk is coming through the system. Normally, when asset values rise, the thresholds of tax rise alongside it. So the same house isn't taxed by a huge degree more just because it's risen in value. I mean, we want to protect people's family homes. Surely this is Darren Jones, the shadow chief secretary to the Treasury, the man who's going to be in charge of tax and spend under a Labour government, saying that he won't raise that threshold. He will want to take that wealth.
But all he said is we will not be changing this Conservative Party's policy on inheritance tax. They didn't say we're going to increase inheritance tax. They said we are going to keep it exactly as this Conservative...
Stella, the Labour Party complains about frozen thresholds in income tax, for example. They call that a tax rise under the Conservatives. Why then, if they refuse to raise the threshold for inheritance tax, is that not a tax rise? Why is that not an inheritance tax rise on ordinary people?
It's not on ordinary people. Inheritance tax is being paid by 4%. As you say, because it is frozen...
Is that not every year?
To 6%, sorry?
A huge number of people will pay inheritance tax.
The Institute of Fiscal Studies and a lot of other influential think tanks have said that it was actually going to be a very fair and welcome policy by a lot of people if inheritance tax was to increase, which is not what the Labour Party is suggesting, by the way. And it is a fact that for people to feel like tax is equal, they want to feel like there aren't loopholes that people are able to go through and pay less tax. So I don't think that it is... I don't think that it is the responsibility of the Labour Party, frankly, to make it even easier for millionaires to avoid paying tax.
Now, of course, we're expecting the Labour Party to win a historic majority. Some people have been comparing what might happen in the whole United Kingdom in the next 18 or so hours to what happened in Scotland in 2015. In Scotland in 2015, all but 3 seats were won by the SNP. I mean, we could be seeing a similar sort of one-party state.
I don't know if that's going to be the case. I do hope that the Labour Party will have a comfortable enough majority to be able to govern well. As you said, the vote seems to be very, very effective. People are completely fed up. They want to vote for change. They want to see a Labour government. We will see what happens tomorrow. It all depends on whether people actually vote, on whether people actually show up, or on whether a lot of people think that, OK, Labour is going to win, so we might as well stay at home, or a lot of disaffected people basically feeling like, the victory is already in the bag. We may as well stay at home. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to be a nice, good victory for the Labour Party tomorrow. Hopefully, they're going to have a really nice, comfortable majority. Frankly, I do expect it to be a historic victory. I think there will be a lot to celebrate tomorrow, and we'll see how it goes. It's going to be very, very interesting for most of us in any case.
OK, well, I'm sure you'll be staying up all night. Stella Santakitou, political commentator, thank you very much indeed.
Goodness me, I think that this is something that people will perhaps be a little bit surprised by a couple of weeks or a couple of months, or sort of the first fiscal statement that the Labour Party do. A few years ago, Rachel Reeves was talking about raising all sorts of taxes on wealth, not on income, but on wealth. I find it hard to believe that, given the state of the public finances as they are now, that she's abandoned all of these policies. Even if she's not talking about them now, even if they're not explicitly laid out in the manifesto, I mean, we haven't heard them explicitly ruled out on this campaign.
Yes, and of course, the Labour Party, people within the Labour Party are going to be more in favour of tax and wealth distribution than the Conservatives would be. Is Rachel Reeves and Darren Jones in public, you know, pretending to perhaps be a little more centrist, a little bit more conservative on these issues than they might be in practice? But of course, the IFS has said this about all the manifestos, haven't they? They've said whatever party is in power, they may well end up either having to cut public spending dramatically or hiking those taxes. So there you go.
Well, what a positive note to turn away from the Labour Party because after 2019, the Labour Party was of course, the country turned away from Labour in favour of the Brexit-backing Conservatives in the Red Wall. Well, those voters are once again in the spotlight now, ahead of polling stations opening tomorrow. But in this election, will industrial heartlands of the Midlands and the North return to their roots or set a new political course?
Well, with issues that date back decades, some in former mining communities like Ashfield feel politics won't bring the change desperately needed. Now our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has the story for us.
Living amongst the coalfields and steelworks, Red Wall communities had everything: employment, housing, purpose. The deep wound of industry's disappearance in the final decades of the 20th century is still healing. Simon, a leader at the local college, has worked in Sutton in Ashfield since the 90s.
In many areas of Ashfield, in many neighbourhoods, there are the obvious signs and indicators of poverty and disadvantage.
If England means as much to...
At a coffee morning run by the college, spirits are raised. The football is tying people together. Meanwhile, the election is testing the fabric of Britain's democracy. Here, crime and antisocial behaviour are priorities.
You do hear of it, people having bags snatched and things like that. So, yeah, I think policing's a big issue around this area.
Not far from the Downing Street here in Ashfield, some of the poorest parts of the Red Wall can be found. The problems here stretch past a term of Parliament.
The issues to do with unemployment, people adjusting to new ways of needing to learn and learn new skills for new employment, they've been around for a long time.
Ashfield is a single brick in the former Red Wall. In 2019, the switch from Labour to the Conservatives, influenced by Brexit, surprised the nation. The promise of levelling up has brought millions of pounds for local projects, but critics say it's not enough. Now, voter trends in the Red Wall are tricky to predict.
The challenge that candidates in Red Wall constituencies face is whether they can convince voters that change is possible when the problems they face stretch between generations over decades.
At a nearby food bank, volunteers and staff from the college help the desperate.
We've had one come in this morning who's actually just been released from custody.
Few people using the service think politics can change the life they're living, says Sandra.
They're quite disillusioned with politics. They're thinking that things are not going to change in the way that they need them to be.
Voters here have a hand in deciding the direction Britain takes next. But Parliament, the place where the future of the Red Wall rests, feels very far away. Will Hollis, GB News in Ashfield.
It's that sense of disillusionment, isn't it? People not really voting for something with great passion.
It could make the aftermath of the election pretty volatile, really, and then the honeymoon that the new government wins potentially quite short.
Yes. Well, coming up, of course, the countdown continues to the big general election tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. We've got a number of excellent guests for you.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Question is...
Should our museums stay free for everyone and anyone, or should we be charging our tourists?
So many of the artefacts are from around the world, stolen actually,
I think it's almost to add insult to injury to ask people to pay to see the artifacts that were taken without their permission. One of the things that the museum set itself up for is a kind of World Heritage where you can see the stuff they took from your country free of charge, because the British state's willing to do that. Is one of the reasons why we hold on to many of the artifacts from around the world instead of giving them back.
I mean, that's a noble argument, Wayman, but none of the other countries in the world that also contain artefacts from all over the world indulge in that, do they? We still have to pay to see anything that's come from the UK that might be overseas?
No, but the absolute truth is that we've stolen a lot more over many more years than anybody else, because we're we had a very, very big empire, and during that time, taking things from other countries without their permission.
And I think our wonderful country, the United Kingdom, is the cradle of modern civilization, not of the ancient world, but of the modern world. You know, for centuries, we've contributed things to the world which has spread out around the world, and the influence that we've put upon countries around the globe has been massively significant. I think it's a privilege for people to be able to come to this country and track the history of our country through our museums. I can't understand why they've ever been free. The upkeep of museums runs into hundreds of millions of pounds a year. Somebody's got to maintain them and keep them good. Somebody's got to go around the world and collect the artifacts which are in our museums. And I've always had the adage in life, if something is free, it's probably not worth having.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 2, and there's not just an election happening in the UK, but also over in the US. Pressure is building on Joe Biden to step down from that presidential race as a Democratic congressman from Texas becomes the first lawmaker from within the party to publicly call for him to move aside.
Yes, this all comes as Biden blames his poor debate performance last week on travel exhaustion, going as far as to say he nearly fell asleep on stage.
Well, let's speak to a spokesperson for Republican Overseas, Jennifer Ewing. Good to see you, Jennifer. This is a curious excuse. I think it's the 5th or 6th different excuse we've heard for Joe Biden's debate performance.
Yeah, you're right, Tom. And, you know, as somebody that regularly goes between London and California, I know jet lag is not a joke. However, that's not what's going on here. You're right to say in the last few days, we've heard that it's been a cold, and then it was that President Biden was over-prepared for the debate. And then last night, we hear that it was, in fact, jet lag from all of his travels. When the fact of the matter, what's going on is the Biden family, the Democratic Party, in conjunction with a lot of the media, has been lying to the American people about the cognitive state of our president, and that's not okay. I mean, this is verging on a national security risk, and there is no way that he can remain on the top of the ticket, no matter how difficult it is to get him to step aside.
And Jennifer, how significant is it that this Democrat congressman has come out to say he has to go?
Sure. I mean, a lot of talk is happening, Emily, behind closed doors. The fact that Lloyd is the first person to come out is significant because it's newsmaking, but that the dam will break for sure. One interesting thing to keep an eye on, and it started early evening our time last night, is all this talk about Kamala being top of the ticket, which is something that I can't even believe is coming out of my mouth, but because she's even less popular than the president. But it would be an elegant solution to keep her, or move her rather, to the top of the ticket, because one, they'd be able to keep the hundreds of millions of dollars that they've raised for Biden, which they wouldn't be able to do if they completely got rid of both of them. And then number two, it doesn't look like they've done the uncomfortable thing by, dump their DEI candidate. So keep an eye on that. A lot of people are talking about that. Apparently, Michelle Obama has even been calling big donors to ask them for donations to Kamala. So again, something I never saw coming. And I am somebody who didn't think a year ago I was saying Biden can't be the candidate, but I didn't think it would be Kamala either.
No one did, and yet you're right to say that lots of polls have put her very, very unpopular indeed. Most say more unpopular than Biden. There was one poll yesterday from CNN that suggested she was a couple of points more popular than Biden now. Not because she's grown in popularity, but of course because Biden has collapsed in popularity. She's still behind Trump in a head-to-head, but less behind than Biden. Could we start to see more polls like this?
I think, Tom, that's exactly what you will see. And it's not, again, because she's popular or because she can beat Trump. It's because the Democrats have a really difficult situation with regards to removing Biden. He has to make the choice himself, or there are a few other things that could happen regarding the convention or, God forbid, a health issue. But and one of the things blocking them was the Kamala Harris problem, as people were beginning to call it. If you replaced her with, say, a Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, or, another governor, she doesn't want to step aside. So this way, they keep the funds raised, and it's a somewhat elegant solution to a mess.
Well, Jennifer Ewing, thank you so much for bringing us all of that stateside.
Right, well, let's return to the election here. And, Tom, it's interesting to look at what the papers are saying. You've got the Telegraph pushing out huge amounts of reports about potential tax raids to come under Labour. Of course, you've got The Guardian and more left-wing supporting newspapers saying this is the time for change, etc., etc. Have all the papers come out now for one party or another?
No. The Sun. Rupert Murdoch's The Sun newspaper, which of course had the famous headline in 1992, it was The Sun what won it when it declared for the Conservatives. It's still yet to declare. It's the last possible moment. Tonight we should be seeing that.
It's very interesting. Let's speak to political commentator Peter Spencer on that point, Peter. Is it relevant whether papers come out in support of parties in this day and age?
Increasingly less so. I mean, years ago, newspapers mattered hugely. Then television overtook them, and now social media has overtaken the pair of them. Nonetheless, The Sun, to the best of my knowledge, is Britain's best-selling paper, and obviously it will have an impact whichever way it comes out. Particularly, I would suggest, if it came out in favour of the Labour Party. Now, of course, the editor of The Sun has a dilemma on his or her hands. Can't remember who's actually running it just now. At the point being that, on the one hand, yes, they wish an election to go in a particular direction, whatever direction they want. At the same time, they will have read the runes, which tell us that there's an overwhelming likelihood of a Labour victory. Many of those people voting for Labour will, of course, be Sun readers. They need to go with the flow as well as lead the flow. Point one. I'll make one other point, which is the fact that with Rachel Reeves in number 11 Downing Street, which is almost certainly going to be the case come this weekend, she is a former Bank of England economist. She's very business friendly. Murdoch will like the sound of that.
It's very, very interesting that this is so very late in the campaign. The Sun newspaper, particularly, it backed Blair in 3 elections. Blair won 3 elections. It backed Cameron in 2010 and 2015, and then May in 17 and Boris in 2019. It's always backed a winner. Could it be that this is the first time in recent history that the Sun newspaper has not backed the winning candidate?
It would be if it didn't go with Sir Keir Starmer. I mean, to be honest, if I had to, I realise that betting is slightly sort of a bit non-new these days, but if I had to put a pony on it, I would say that the Sun will end up backing the Labour Party for the reasons that I've mentioned. And in fact, I've just received the latest issue of Private Eye, picture of the Prime Minister in Downing Street saying, "It's not over yet, goodbye." He says it already.
Yeah, Peter Spencer, I'm just reading in The Guardian this headline. Labour expects surge of shy reform voters in some northern and Midland seats. Activists forecast margins of less than 2,000 votes separating them from Farage's party. Be very interesting to see if Labour loses expected seats to reform.
It certainly will, and it's very hard to know which way this will go, but very clearly what has emerged in recent days is, in spite of Farage's extraordinary skill, a little bit like Winston Churchill or indeed Boris Johnson, of weaponising the English language, the fact remains that we've had a number of people flipping over from the Reform Party back to the Conservative Party. I'm talking about candidates here, on the grounds that while Farage and Tice may be pretty clean, that the suggestion has been made that a great swathe of the candidates are actually racist and misogynist, and the people who flipped over want nothing to do with them.
And of course, both Tice and Farage have themselves said they had a problem with vetting many of these candidates. But it will be fascinating to see just how many votes this sort of upstart party is able to get, and whether many people will go back to the Conservatives in the hope of heeding that message and stopping what's being really quite widely known now as the Labour supermajority. But Peter Spencer, thank you so much for joining us here. This is a fascinating election, perhaps one of the most peculiar elections of modern British history.
Yes, and we're going to be bringing you more on the campaign trail to come. Lots of questions after your headlines with Sophia.
Emily, thank you. It's 2:33. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. Sir Keir Starmer says that a speech by Boris Johnson last night is a reminder of chaos and division. Labour is making its final pitch with a message to voters that if they want change, they must vote for it. The Liberal Democrats offered a similar assessment, with Sir Ed Davey describing Mr Johnson's reappearance as bizarre and a sign that voters are ready to move on. It comes after the former Prime Minister made his first and only speech of the election campaign, saying that a Labour government would mean higher taxes. A Conservative minister has conceded that Labour is likely to win a landslide majority. Mel Stride told GB News that while he accepts polls pointing to a big win for Labour, only voters can decide the final outcome. His comments come after an editorial published in The Telegraph today by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who says the Conservatives must prepare for the frustration of opposition. In other news, the former leader of the DUP will face a trial over allegations of historical sex abuse. A judge at Newry Magistrates Court said this morning that Sir Geoffrey Donaldson and his wife, Lady Eleanor Donaldson, both have a case to answer in connection with the allegations. Sir Geoffrey is accused of 1 charge of rape, 4 of gross indecency and 13 charges of indecent assault between 1985 and 2008. And the King and Queen are in Scotland for their annual Holyrood Week. His Majesty joined Queen Camilla at a service in Edinburgh, celebrating the Order of the Thistle at St Giles's Cathedral. The Prince of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh were also in attendance for an extra special service as the Scottish capital celebrates 900 years. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a cloudy day for most of us today. Rain and drizzle moving in from the west. A bit of a brighter start across eastern areas. That's because we've got a slight ridge ahead of the weather fronts, bringing that cloudy and damp weather, but it will arrive later on today. And behind it, it will turn much clearer as we head into this afternoon across northwestern areas, but still some spells of quite wet weather, drizzly rain, particularly over the high ground and coast. We could see some fog and mist around as well. throughout this afternoon across western areas of Wales, down into southwest England as well. Brighter across central and eastern areas, highs of around 20 degrees, so not feeling too bad, but actually across the northwest, when that rain does clear through, the winds are really going to pick up as we head into this evening and into Thursday as well. And we'll also start to see some pretty heavy showers moving in. There is a risk of thunderstorms with these showers moving into northwestern areas of Scotland, as well as some northern areas of Northern Ireland. Now, the band of rain will likely sit slightly across northeastern areas of England, central areas of England as well into this evening, and there'll be quite a lot of cloud round across the south and east. But across Wales and southwest England, starting to brighten up a little bit here. But that breezier weather will become more widely felt as we head towards Thursday. So a clearer night to come, some clear spells, mainly dry for many southern and central areas, but these showers will continue to push in, particularly across northwestern Scotland and some southwestern areas of Scotland as well. So a slightly fresher start tomorrow with those clearer skies tonight, but tomorrow will be a much brighter day, more in the way of sunshine for southern and central areas, and it should stay dry through much of the day, but frequent showers will still move in for western areas of northwestern England, Scotland and some parts of Northern Ireland as well. And we could see gale force winds as well as we head into the afternoon. So a fresh feeling afternoon in the north, a little bit warmer in the south with highs of around 21 degrees.
The latest GB News travel.
Hi again, good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Glasgow, the southbound M74 seeing queues of around about 25 minutes at the moment, just around the turn off of Carlisle Junction 3. 2 lanes are combed off, a 3-mile queue there for a medical emergency. Now, there's a broken down van causing queues on the northbound M6. Lane 1's out, so it's slow from Middlewich 18 up to Knutsford 19. Southbound M6, Coventry down to Rugby, that's junction 2 to 1. Queues for vehicle fire, 2 lanes currently combed off. In Essex, the southbound side of the Colchester bypass has a lane shut. There's been a collision, junction 28 towards the Avenue of Remembrance roundabout junction 27, so queues away from Colchester. And both sides of the M26, the traffic being held from 2A Roughton to junction 5 for the M25 and queuing. There's people on the road there.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Right, well, it's the night before. We all go to the ballot box, get down to the polling stations. And with us is Aidan McGree, who usually we talk to you about the sports, and we will do, don't worry. But first, the election. What's your hot take?
Hot take? Well, I haven't voted since 2005.
Wow.
So that was a conscious decision. Not even the Brexit referendum. I didn't vote in that either. I was on holiday that time. So that was a conscious decision since 2005. That was Michael Howard. So I did vote in the 2 before that, and I backed the losing party. So anyone I'm backing ought to be quite fearful. But no, I've decided to vote this time.
Oh, wow.
Tomorrow, yeah. And I'm sorry, it's tomorrow morning, isn't it? So I've got a dash to Peterborough to get my passport. My enabling me to go to Germany this weekend. So I've got to be quick off the mark to get in to the polling booth in the morning.
You're disillusioned no more?
No, I'm not. No, I don't feel homeless anymore. I'm a reform of the party I would prefer. I prefer to go for. I feel as if they represent me. I just feel that if they can get into opposition, they can make Parliament a little bit more interesting. And for my business interests as well, they'd be a better bet for me because I feel I'm going to get taxed to the hilt. For all the properties and everything, my rentals, and that's going to damage me.
So you don't feel particularly swayed by the Conservatives' argument that there's going to be this enormous Labour majority, and the only way to have a sort of opposition at all in the House of Commons is to vote for the larger, the Conservative Party?
It'll be a nodding contest, Tom. That's what will happen. You'll have the Conservatives opposite Labour, and they don't fundamentally disagree on that much. I'm going to see a slightly bigger burden in terms of tax, but in terms of the other stuff, you're going back to the stuff like mass immigration, uncontrolled immigration, industrial unrest, high taxation, highest I think we've had in 70 years. That kind of stuff isn't going to change very much, and so I'd rather see fewer but more effective opposition in Parliament, even if that only amounts to half a dozen seats, than see the Tories. I think that see the Tories go up against Labour. I just don't think they're very effective anymore. I really don't.
And you talk a lot to lots of different people, I'm sure.
Yep.
Out and about. What are they saying to you? Are they going to get down to the polling station? Because we're hearing that turnout might be low.
Low, really. Look, I think that you might see a little bit of an upsurge in the youth vote. I mean, some members of my family are saying the idea of the first £20,000 being tax-free is very advantageous to them. Don't forget, they haven't got much hope at the moment. And that generation hasn't really got much hope of getting onto the property ladder. So they would hopefully get a little bit of hope on that one. Go on, Tom.
With a handful of MP, I mean, we're talking the most optimistic polls are suggesting, I mean, less than 10% of Parliament. I mean, really, really, very, very few MPs believing in that stuff. Those policies aren't going to happen.
No, they're not going to happen. You're absolutely right. But I can see why people would be attracted to them. Don't forget, there's an element of naivety in the youth vote. There are some people who will place their vote tomorrow thinking that reform will get into power. They probably, you know, it's a little bit naive. I accept that. I was a bit like that myself when I was. In fact, I was the generation, the first election I voted in was in May 1997 when Blair got in. You know, loads of people were expecting, my left-wing friends were expecting the Bolshevik Revolution. Didn't quite happen. We realised within a month it wasn't going to happen. But
it's interesting how many people have voted for all parties, all parties across the day. Anyway, let's get back to the sports. Yeah. England's Luke Shaw. He's about to address the media.
He is indeed. So are we going to him now, or do you want me to chat for a bit?
I'll chat for a bit.
Yeah, OK. Well, look, it's significant that he's up in front of the media today because he hasn't played a game of football at any level since February the 18th this year. Some would say it was extraordinary that he even went on the trip. He's a key part, if he's fit and firing, he's a key part of England's plan because he offers balance on that left-hand side, Tom. So if he's there, then great. But goodness me, I doubt he's match fit. It represents a huge gamble. Now, the fact that they're putting him up to speak in front of the media suggests he's going to be involved.
So you think that that actually Gareth Southgate, for the first substantial time in this tournament, will change the formula of this team? Because he's been sticking to a relatively similar team for the last 3 games.
Tom, he simply has to change something because at the moment they're being stifled by the low block. That's 2 banks of 4. That's teams getting in front of us and getting in front of our players, our top players, and we've got some outstanding forward players and saying, you break us down, and we've not been able to do that. We've been relying on individual flashes of brilliance. We can't leave it until 15 seconds from time anymore. They're playing against Switzerland, who man for man they are vastly superior to. But at the moment, if the team are playing the way they are earlier in the tournament, I'm talking about Denmark, even Serbia to some degree, certainly Slovakia in the second round, then they're going to meet a similar end, except they might not be so fortunate this time. Also, Switzerland have got some good form so far. They dispatched Italy last round, the holders, really, really impressive, and they got a draw out of Germany when they probably should have won. And their manager, who 20 years ago went up against a very young Wayne Rooney and was literally taken to the cleaners, he's got a little bit of a revenge mission out for England. He said, look, we've done Italy, we ran Germany close, 3 lines are next.
And your thoughts on this Jude Bellingham saga?
Well, look, I spoke to you yesterday about it, and I think there are stories circulating this morning that he's not going to know until 24 hours before the game. So that leads me to think it is. That leads me to think that I don't think UEFA would do that, and it leads me to think that it won't be a ban. They won't be able to take him out of the team because England will justifiably say, well, this is foul play, because you've known about this incident since last Sunday, and yet you've told us on the Friday that he's not going to be able to play, and so we haven't been able to launch any kind of contingency plan. So therefore, that would leave England pretty much high and dry. Southgate would therefore be forced into a tactical reshuffle when he's already got his problems in the back of his defence. So that leads me to think that I would have thought the FA by now had been briefed, just off the record, to say, look, it's going to be a fine. You decide amongst yourself who's going to pay it. Is it going to be the player? Is it going to be the FA themselves? But I would be shocked. That would be unprecedented for UEFA to issue a ban on the eve of a game. That would be grossly unfair, and I think it'll be a fine.
Yeah.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you very much, Aidan. Always great to chat to you. Aidan McGee, sports broadcaster, of course.
Yes, now coming up, we'll be getting back to the general election, of course, and my goodness me, it's turning out to be finally a little bit of an interesting and anticipatory contest. Of course, just a few hours now until polls open tomorrow morning.
Is it a done deal?
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
How deep is the rift between Prince William and Prince Harry? Well, it's been reported that Prince William is refusing to speak to Prince Harry and has even taken on the role of disciplinarian, which was once, of course, the job of Prince Philip. But has that job gone now to William? And does he indeed rule with a rod of iron? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the former BBC Royal correspondent Michael Cole. Himself has a lot of iron. Do you think this is a fair approximation of the character? After all, Michael Cole, surely the palace could do with a firm leader at the moment. Is Wills the man?
I think he is, Martin, and good afternoon to you. William, 42 last Friday. He's grown into the role of heir apparent. He looks good, he sounds good. Now, when the late Queen was alive, she was the chairman of the board, but the chief executive was definitely Prince Philip. She was the head of state, but he was the head of the family. He chaired the Way Ahead Committee. He liaised with the security services. And he laid down the law for a long, long time. Of course, Duchess of York, Sarah, Fergie, was banished. And he also used to go through the invitation lists for any royal event, striking off people he didn't want there. So he was very much in charge. And I think the situation with William is that when he makes up his mind is made up. And he's doing extraordinarily well. And he's doing it without the daily support in public of his wife, of course. And we all wish Kate, the Princess of Wales, well and a speedy continued recovery. And I think the King will be welcoming his older son taking this more prominent role because, quite frankly, he can't do everything.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 12 minutes to 3 o'clock. And a little bit later on, tonight at 7 o'clock on GB News, our political editor, Christopher Hope, has an interview with Nigel Farage, the leader of the Reform Party, in our final episode of Vote 2024, The Leaders.
Yes, so this evening, 7 o'clock is the time to tune in if you want to hear this final interview of the series before the general election, this time with Nigel Farage. I wonder what Christopher Hope will have to ask.
Yes, of course, he sat down with the leaders of the four largest parties in UK politics by predicted vote share. That, of course, is the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Reform Party and the Liberal Democrats. The four leaders who have all had their 7 p.m. slots here on GB News.
Yes, I wonder if he'll ask, which constituencies are they most confident about, whether they believe the polls as they are, perhaps something about some of these candidates who decided to defect at the last minute. Lots to ask, perhaps
So
about
much
tax
to ask.
policy.
And ultimately, this will be a crucial factor in this general election. Whether the reform vote will come from new voters, we were talking to Aidan McGee, who hasn't voted since 2005, perhaps it will have a different effect if there's lots of new people brought in who hadn't voted before. But of course, if there are people who'd previously voted for other parties, we might suddenly see some very peculiar results, some of the safest Conservative seats in the country. I mean, Keir Starmer was in Buckinghamshire earlier this week with a seat of around 25 or 30,000 seats in those areas. Deepest blue territory of the country.
Well, Keith says...
Which could be completely red.
Keith says, my opinion is Labour will win comfortably, but with not such a huge majority. Conservatives neck and neck in votes with Reform in second place, Lib Dems third. Keith, that's a possibility. That is a possibility. We were talking about Boris Johnson coming in at the last minute, a little bit earlier, to give his support to the Conservatives. Mark says, what is the fascination with Boris Johnson? He was a very average London mayor. The Boris bikes were brought in by Ken Livingstone. Does no one remember the millions of pounds wasted on the Garden Bridge? You go on, he was a terrible Prime Minister. Mark, yes, you're not too keen on Boris Johnson. You've written a bit of an essay here. Ends with the man's a joke. So, yes, not much support for the man there.
One thing you can say about Boris Johnson is everyone has an opinion.
Everyone has an opinion.
Someone that does divide opinion, and to some extent a similar figure there in terms of how he can excite a crowd to Nigel Farage. They disagree on a lot of things, of course, not least Ukraine, not least some of the issues around migration as well. But my goodness me, they do have a way with words in a way that I think very few politicians of our generation do, particularly, potentially, Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. Neither of them are particularly enigmatic orators.
It may seem a little unimportant, but that's the messiest I've ever seen Boris Johnson's hair. He must have done a real big ruffle before he got onto the lectern.
He's been on holiday for most of this general election
I just
campaign.
let it grow.
Sunning himself.
In Sardinia?
Goodness me.
All right for some, eh?
Yeah. But, of course, this election is a very pivotal moment. It will set the course of the country for the next 5 years. And if we're to believe these polls, and they're all telling a very similar story, if we're to believe these polls, it'll be the first time we don't have a Conservative Prime Minister since 2010. And that's a very, very long time to have had a varying number of Conservative Prime Ministers, although it must be said, in different complexities of government, in different compositions. First a coalition, then a very small majority, then a minority. And only for the last 4.5 years has there been a majority government.
And it'll be very interesting to see just how many of you bother to go out and vote. Some talking about turnout being quite low, maybe in the late 50% or 60% of people, which is not a lot, really.
Well, these will be all things that we're measuring throughout the night.
You're going to be up all night for us.
We're going to be up all night. I've got a touchscreen that I've been playing with all week. We're going to be hosting this results show that we're going to have reporters across the country too. And some of those early results will tell us actually some of the biggest stories. We'll be able to see pretty much from the word go. About an hour after those polls close, we'll have the first seat or two come in. And they'll be able to confirm for the first time with real votes rather than with polls just how accurate all of these polls have been and what sort of composition we can expect from the House of Commons. Could it be the case that we've got the smallest opposition in the House of Commons since 1931?
What's for sure is that the makeup of the House of Commons is going to look very different indeed from Friday. So, yes, remember your voter ID. Yes, we've been told to drum this in because it's easy to forget if you've been going down to the polling station for decades and decades and decades, and now you need your ID. Interesting, lots of these views. Paul says vote for change, vote Labour tomorrow. Crete says vote for real change, vote Reform UK. So there you go.
Well, of course, a passport, a driver's licence, a provisional driver's licence, all accepted as forms of identification. Don't forget them. Don't forget to vote. It's your civic duty. Even if you turn up and just say none of the above on your ballot paper, it's worthwhile doing. Well, that's been it from us. Good afternoon, Britain. Up next, of course, is Martin Dorney.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a cloudy day for most of us today. Rain and drizzle moving in from the west. A bit of a brighter start across eastern areas. That's because we've got a slight ridge ahead of the weather fronts, bringing that cloudy and damp weather, but it will arrive later on today. And behind it, it will turn much clearer as we head into this afternoon across northwestern areas, but still some spells of quite wet weather, drizzly rain, particularly over the high ground and coast. We could see some fog and mist around as well throughout this afternoon across western areas of Wales, down into southwest England as well. Brighter across central and eastern areas, highs of around 20 degrees, so not feeling too bad, but actually across the northwest when that rain does clear through, the winds are really going to pick up as we head into this evening and into Thursday as well. And we'll also start to see some pretty heavy showers moving in. There is a risk of thunderstorms with these showers moving into northwestern areas of Scotland as well as some northern areas of Northern Ireland. Now the band of rain will likely sit slightly across northeastern areas of England, central areas of England as well into this evening, and there'll be quite a lot of cloud round across the south and east, but across Wales and southwest England starting to brighten up a little bit here. But that breezier weather will become more widely felt as we head towards Thursday. So a clearer night to come, some